It's like it's that time again. We're live, y'all. Give me a chance to post some links as always. Got to post those links. So bear with me. Gotta wait for it to, again, wait for it to pop up on the page and share the link. Happy hump day to everybody. Hope y'all having a good week so far. Hope everybody brought some questions. You're gonna have to give me a minute. Let me just post all these links. Till Facebook won't let me anymore. I wish there's a way I could just check off all the groups I want to post it to and then do it all at once. That would be really nice if that was an option. So it takes me a minute or two. Chick-fil-A, the town burnt down. It was next to Wendy's, and Wendy's got water damage. Well, damn. I hate to hear that, brother. Wonder what caused the fire. Was it something natural or a Chick-fil-A hater? I might answer a few questions and pause a little bit. Give me a chance to see. What's going on, Gordon? What's up, Billy? Bill Nye, the science denier. Bill Nye. What's going on, Jim? What's up, brother? DEI. Might have been. Yeah, it's hard to tell. Hard to say these days what happens. So is everybody having a good week so far? About halfway through. Well, they'll let me post more than usual. Maybe it's best if I just pause a little bit. Maybe that's the trick. Just put a minute or two in between. There's a lot of groups I'm in. I'd like to be able to share it to you. Maybe some of you all can share some of your favorite groups if it's not already in there. That'd be a good idea. Bear with me. I know it's going to stop me in a second now. So. What's going on, Chris? What's up, Mark? Too much rain there, huh? Where you at, Mark? We've been getting a lot. I guess the last couple of months, man. We've had some major flooding here in Kentucky, man. What's up, Scott? What's up, Mikey? What's going on, Morgan? Good to see y'all in here. Damn, I lose. Which one was this? Yeah, hopefully it'll let me post in some of these other ones here in a minute. I know it's going to stop me soon, though. Oh, well. So I thought I didn't hit the button. Damn. Slacking. So what's everybody got going this week? It's starting to warm up, man. I gotta close this. I'm hearing an echo. Hearing an echo. Well, thank you, Jim. Appreciate it, brother. It's my freak flag, baby. Gotta let that freak flag fly, man. Yeah, it is quiet. What's going on, Mark? Yeah, I was trying to share some links and post to some pages. They only let me do like 10 or 11, maybe, and that's about it. Then they put the skids on it. Still on 5 cases, taking a break till the figs are ready. Awesome. I want to how the figs turn out. I've done a lot of plum wine, but I've not done figs. 5 cases. Yeah, that's what you said. 5 cases. Yep, I got you, brother. Oh, still on. Yeah. All right. Sitting on 5. That's good. Yeah, I'd like to try some fig. You ever read about figs? Somehow they're wasp larvae in them or some shit. Like a wasp goes in and dies and lays a larvae or something. Y'all read that shit? Heard about that? It's like it's got some kind of wasp larvae. Y'all read that before? Maybe that's that crunchy shit in there, but it's like I guess the wasp breaks down. Yeah, I think the actual wasp goes into the flower, and then the flower closes on the wasp, and it breaks it down. I'm gonna Google it. I saw something about that a long time ago, man. I had this wasps in figs. Fig trees and wasps. Do figs have wasps in them? Figs can have wasps in them. It depends. Around 90% of us growing fig trees at home will never have a wasp in our figs. Okay. I thought they all had them. Yeah, it's gone by the time you actually eat it. The female fig produces an enzyme that completely digests the wasp. So yeah, you're not actually eating a wasp. It's already been digested. Yeah, it's crazy. I was reading that before and I was like, wow. So I guess not all of them do. I was thinking maybe it's part of the process. Yeah, they rely on them for the pollination. That's interesting. Fig wasp. Hmm. So I guess it's just a pollinating wasps. So they don't all have it. I thought they all had it. So at least that's not the case. But some of them do. It's crazy. Dried figs. Yeah, man. I appreciate it, Scott. Yeah, that stuff gets expensive to ship fruit. I'm not sure what the growing range is. Let's see. Fig trees. Fig tree range map. I guess it depends on the fig. Figs go, yeah, I guess they can go all over, really. I didn't know that either, brother. Fig, all right, the zones in the U.S. are 1A to 13B, and figs, find the figs in range 3B to 7B. So let me see what the hell it is. So basic, well, damn, give me a better map than that. Shit. 3B. So, yeah, except for like northern Montana, northern North Dakota, northern Minnesota, northern Michigan, or I mean, Wisconsin, and maybe North Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and New York, just the very northern part of those, and some parts of Colorado, looks like. Just the purple there, it doesn't grow. But looks like from, maybe mid Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, central Michigan, central New York, and down, they grow. And let's see. Interesting. Hmm. This where we all learn something. I didn't know all this about figs. But I thought it was all of them that had a little wasp in them. I didn't realize it's just some of them do, some of them don't. But yeah, they consume the damn wasp. Yeah, they're superfood for sure, Gordon. What's up, Hellbilly? What's going on, brother? Really? So you have a little orchard of them up there, Scott? Is that 5 cases of figs or 5 acres of figs? I like to have 5 acres. 5 acres of figs. Good question, brother. I posted some information on that earlier. A lot of people that use molasses, there's a lot of different grades of molasses. And when you get to the lower grade blackstrap, there's only like 40 to 60% sugars in some of them. So that means half the sugars in them aren't going to um, be fermentable unless you add some invertase. And that's something that we normally don't fool with. So there is an enzyme that will help break down some of those sugars that will allow you to ferment it out further, but it's just not something that we normally have. Um, so a lot of times when you're fermenting, you're making rums and you're mixing a lot of water with molasses, and that's your main 2 ingredients. You're not adding any sugar or anything, just trying to go with the molasses. You're going to have a lot of unfermentable sugars depending on the grade of uh, of the of the actual molasses that you're using. Let me find that little chart, and I shared it, I think, in the militia group. Let me scroll down and find that so I can share it with you guys. Let's see. Let's see. Good question, and I think it's important that everybody knows this to like make rum, because it definitely pays to get a little better quality rum, or just add some sugar to help it along, or some dextrose or anything like that, of course. But somewhere, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's in another group. Well, let's see. Did I say that, or was I on the phone when I did that? I think I was on the daggone phone. Let's see if I'm trying to remember who I was sharing that with. Hmm. Anyway, what it talked about was all the different grades of actual molasses, and there's some that I think it gets 40 to 60. I think was the lowest grade, and that was like in the gold barrel. I think that was a grade just above that. I'm not sure if there's any yeast with an invertase in it or not. I don't think that the yellow label has it. That'd be a good read. I'll check and see, but I'm not sure if that fungus would be able to break these particular sugars down. Um, but I'm definitely going to read about that and make a note of that. Yeah, yeah, it's a common question that we get a lot of times, and a lot of people, especially their first time making rums, they realize that, hang on, need some little notepad paper. Little papers are written on. I make myself lots of notes because I forget everything. So I got lots of squares of paper usually here, but yeah, but their first time, and they're like, man, I don't know what my fermentation stuck. I started out at 1.090, and now I'm at like 1.030 or 1.020, and it's just not going any farther. I'm stuck. And I'm going. And the worst thing to do, and of course that's the first thing people do, is start throwing the baking soda to it, thinking, "Oh, my pH must be low." Because a lot of times pH will. Um, yeah, definitely tell him and let me know who it is. Send me a message. But a lot of times that's the first thing they'll do is they'll check pH and they'll see that the pH is going to be a little bit low because it always drops down in these rum fermentations because it's just there's no also nutrients. They either think it's pH or they forgot to add the nutrients, so they start throwing nutrients at it and baking soda. And of course, that'll ruin the taste of it if throwing all that baking soda in there. It'll stress the hell out of yeast. The oxidation that occurs makes them going back in the breeding cycle. And then, if there's no nutrients in there, then of course they're going to go hungry and start cannibalizing each other. And it just makes it stresses the hell out of them. So that's one good thing. You put your oyster shells in there so you kind of eliminate um, that part of it. And for those of you who might not know, uh, boiled oyster shells. Get you some oyster shells from the Tractor Supply. We've talked about this in here. Get them, clean them up, boil them, and kill anything off and kill any off odors or anything like that, and any bacteria that might be in it. I'm not sure how they process it before they bag it up. It's used for chicken feed. To supplement the chicken calcium intake to make their eggs harder for shipping. And it's also used in farming, in planting um, to help build up the calcium in your soil and buffer your soil to keep it from becoming acidic. So it's calcium carbonate, and it's slow release, so it's not something that's going to instantly bring pH up. It really doesn't mix with water well if it's a powder. Um, but what happens is as the acids build up in your mash or wash in this case, um, it'll eat away at this calcium carbonate and help neutralize itself. So it's like the stable 5.2 kind of stabilizer stuff that you can also use. It's just a fancy bottle of calcium carbonate. Eggshells, you can use eggshells as well, but you definitely, with eggshells, you want to boil them really well and kill any bacteria, a lot of bacteria on the eggshells. Um, even if you're using them just for plants, they suggest that I know people bake them in the oven and get them to a certain temperature to kill off any bacteria in them. So definitely want to do one or the other. But using baking soda has a sodium bicarbonate, and that sodium they just don't like the sodium. And a lot of people mention pickling lime, which is good to use at the very beginning, to adjust pH, and it adjusts pH well, and probably definitely better to use than baking soda. If you have to do it mid, if you forget the egg, the oyster shells, um, the crushed oyster shells that you get at the store, or the eggshells. Um, so it is better than baking soda, but it is a calcium hydroxide is what a pickling lime is. So that hydroxide does add a lot of oxygen that the calcium carbonate doesn't. So it will not necessarily stress the yeast, but it puts them back into a breeding cycle for a short period of time. And then, which, is not the best in the middle of your fermentation, but it could be worse. Like baking soda would definitely be worse. But and it works. It works well, and it's not going to cause stress like a baking soda would. So definitely go with calcium carbonate with your crushed shells or eggshells, like Mark's talking about, or throw in some pickling lime. And be careful when you do, because it's going to foam up much like the baking soda from all the, you know, oxygenation that it causes and creates. But it's going to be a little bit longer term solution than baking soda. A lot of times, if you notice, baking soda works for a very short period of time, and then boom, next thing you know, it's getting acidic again. So, but there's a lot of things that people think, when they think, oh, it's a stuck fermentation, when actually it's just the yeast have eaten all the fermentable sugars that are in there, and the only thing that are left are, polysaccharides and oligosaccharides, which are basically um, chains of starches that are larger than three or larger. You know, trisaccharides. Some yeast can eat the trisaccharides, but it definitely, if you get 4 molecules of glucose bonded together or more, your yeast just can't consume them. Yeah, cool. Calcium carbonate. Yeah, that's the bomb. And just you can use just oyster shells in it, if you want to save some money, because I know that like the stable 5.2 isn't cheap. You get a bottle of it. It's not real cheap. And I'm sure if you go to the pet store and get some for your tank, it's not going to be real cheap. But I would definitely boil it real well and clean it before you put it in your fish tanks or in your mash, because there's possibly going to be some bacteria. What's going on, Roy? What's up, Kimbo? What's up, Mitch? Good to see everybody in here. So the question is, we had somebody, and last week. Let me get to this too. If I don't answer your question off the bat, and I get kind of behind, I noticed the Adidas guy from last week, or Nike, which was Nike or Adidas guy from YouTube. I didn't get to his. Um, I'm going to be nice. I'm not going to make a joke about you growing your clams. Oh, that's funny. But I didn't get to his question, and he got mad and left. I hope he stuck around and got his answer. But if not, stick around. I will get to your answer. If I don't get to it and I get caught up, repeat it. I don't care if you ask the same question twice. I promise I won't get mad at you and go off and get unhinged. I'm not like that. Black Pearl, yeah, that Black Pearl stuff is really good. That's what I think. Wes and Philbilly get that and use that stuff up there in Ohio. I think it's actually manufactured up there. But yeah, that's a good quality. That's a good quality molasses. I am going to find that chart though. You absolutely could very well be, Carl, especially if it's early and it's just starting. Um, yeah, just throw it in another bucket. This is going to be a wash, maple syrup wash. So, yeah, just pour it in, some of it in another vessel, dump it in another vessel, and just do it in another. Split the load between a couple of buckets. You get a little 5-gallon bucket and dip some out of there if you got a bigger barrel. Yeah, it happens all the time, but I mean, it's that a lot of times you get stuff that makes a larger cap than what you expect. Everybody that does bananas their first time, unless they've been warned, um, will definitely want to carry some over to another bucket for a little while. But anyway, so they get their rum washes going, and much like your maple wash, and it stops. The maple probably a lot more fermentable sugars than the blackstrap for sure. But it's like 40 to 60%. So half of it isn't a fermentable sugar. So yeah, you're going to have. All right, brother. Have fun at work tomorrow, my friend. Shine on, buddy. So a lot of times the gravity will drop, and it'll drop to like 1.030, 1.020, and just stops. And there's absolutely nothing that you're going to be able to do to get it to start again, other than if you're not getting enough. So if you go from 1.080 to 1.030, you get basically at a 5. So your gravity is going to be fairly low, like a 6% maybe. So that's not going to be a real major producer. So if you want to bump it up, you can add some sugar or some dextrose or something like that to it to help bump the gravity up a little bit, so you get some decent production out of it. No use in adding brown sugar, because basically brown sugar is just a molasses with sugar with the molasses mixed in it. So it's not really going to help that much with blackstrap if you already used a bunch. So yeah, just adding that to it. But I am going to find that chart. I'm going to figure out I know where I found it, so I can go straight to it. Let me get off the figs here. Um, Helps if you can spell. I swear it search work better if you spell shit right. Let's see. Maybe let's see. Maybe I've got it. I think I've got it saved in my phone. Let's see here. I do. No, damn it. That was the golden barrel thing I said there. Yeah, that was the golden barrel information for the individual that I saved. Let's see. What I'm pretty sure that was in the militia that was asked, and I want to get this because it's a really good thing showing the different grades of molasses. It's the only time I've ever seen it. Came from the Distilling Institute, so it's something that you know the charter or something that I made. I do reference the Distilling Institute a lot of times. If y'all looking for good reliable sources of information, maybe go to the Distilling Institute instead of Reddit. Just man, I've seen some pretty crazy shit on a lot of these different ones. Let's see. Here we go. This is it. Let's see here. Let's see here. Yeah, let's. All right, I don't know what I'll do. I'll use my screenshot. I will do that. Now that's saved it. And I should be able to see if I can just drag that in here. No, I cannot. So let me save that. And I always have trouble figuring out where this saves to. Let me find it. I had yeah, here we go. Works perfectly. Screenshots. All right, let me add that. Here we go. Perfect. Now let me unselect that. So this shows your different grades of molasses. So you can see down here the worst, basically a fertilizer grade is going to be 44 to 52, and it's sometimes this will even be sulfur. It's just really not good at all. The C grade, this is what the gold barrel is, 45 to 60. So it's not the best. I think that the stuff we were talking about earlier, the Caribbean black label or black pearl Caribbean is probably going to be in between, a premium and a fancy. It's going to be probably in the 70, probably range 70, maybe 75. I don't think it's here, but I will talk to Wes, and I know he always has or Phil Billy, and see what if they can send me a screenshot from yeah, Anthony. I'm glad you made it, brother. Anthony's who's asking. I'm pretty sure what it is like we were talking about it's just a lower grade, and the gold barrel is this, which is it's great for rum making because it's inexpensive. It's not a real expensive, but those are baby legs, man. Um, but yeah, 45 to 60, and that's cookie. You're making cookies with this stuff. What's going on, Dave? Good seeing you, brother. What's up, Rick? Good question. So let me finish with the rum here. So a lot of times when your yeast gets done with the total sugars that are actually fermentable in here, that there's a lot that's not um, there's a lot that's not convertible that just can't that your yeast can't consume. So the higher the grade you can, the higher proof, but that's not necessarily going to make it any better. That's just going to increase the amount of rum and alcohol that, or not rum, but alcohol that you get. That's going to raise your gravity up, and you'll get more fermented, so you'll increase your production a little bit. So your production will increase, but it's not necessarily going to be better. You're just going to get more alcohol out of it, gallon for gallon. Um, Anthony, you can just add some sugar if you want to. No, no. Once they're done, they're done. Yeah, yeah. With like a dunder pit, with the dunder, what you're doing is you're carrying over flavors. You're not really carrying over fermentable sugars that'll get like on the next go around, like in a sour mash. But the dunder pit is just bringing flavors. That's what it's bringing forward is flavors, and of course, if there's nutrients that weren't consumed from the last wash, a lot of those will carry over. And if and just if you got your eggs, your oyster shells, throw those into from the last ferment. But it just the yeast just basically run out of sugar, and you're still getting a gravity. And also, I will also add that when you're doing a specific gravity, your initial gravity, your starting gravity, it's kind of it'll fool you because you know of here, but going back to here, see that stuff that you're using is a C grade. It's good molasses. I mean, that's what they make cookies out of. It's a great molasses for that. And a lot of people use it. You can see the next grade up, not a whole lot better. Um, and a lot more expensive. There's a big difference in the price between this one and this up here. So, and this, as far as making around, probably one of the better values. But if you want more alcohol and a little more production, you can do this, or you can just add sugar to this and bump it up. Um, but it's just unfermentables. Also, as on your starting gravity, um, the the hydrometer works basically by measuring the amount of sugar in a wash or a mash or in a liquid. And how it does that is simply by density, the density of the water. So as you add sugars to water, um, it gets thick. It thickens like a syrup, and it gets thicker and thicker and thicker until it's just so thick you can't stir it anymore. Right? And it's just like you drop hydrometer in it, it just sticks. Won't go anywhere. So as you get in that, you've got so many unfermentable sugars that it's going to give you a false kind of a reading. Plus, it's a thicker substance in its own right, which can give you a little higher reading than what it actually is. So like, and that's not going to be a lot. That's like if you see it say 1080, it's probably going to be 1076 or something like that. There's going to be a slight difference just because the viscosity of a molasses is a little bit thicker, and that's not because of just sugars that's causing it to be thickened. There's other things in there as well that contribute to the viscosity and the density of it. So it's 1090. So it probably, and actually a 1090 to a 1030, when you do see that, you do see that you're going from 9 to 6. So that, or 9 to 3. So you've got a 6, which is basically the same as going from 1060 to 100, period, just to 1. So, and I think that's around 5 or 6%. So it's a decent amount, like a beer, to start with. It's a normal, grain conversion with no sugars. That's typical for something like that. So 1060, 1070 range is fine. Um, and if you want a little more production, you can throw some sugars in there. But yeah, when you see the start in 1090, it really doesn't you can take that little bit and see 1090 to 1030, I think is where you stopped. So that's, that's, yeah, yeah, yeah. I keep everything kind of low like that. You can kind of cheat like with vodkas. If you're doing like a vodka, yeah, you can cheat a little bit. You can get up to 1090 or 1.1 even, and cheat because you're gonna really push the flavor. You're gonna push the flavors out with your column and distilling it to 185, 190 some proof. So you can cheat a little bit on like vodkas and stuff, but anything else, I generally try to keep it, within normal range, um, just so I don't get a lot of burn. What's going on, April? How are you, my dear? Am I by myself? No, I'm never alone. I got my beautiful woman probably about 20 feet behind me if she's down here. You down here, babe? She's down here. Ran out of room in the fermenter to add more water, or I would have dropped it to 1080. Yeah, yeah, 1080, 1090 is fine for a rum. I mean, it's definitely getting near the high side, but in your case, it worked out great for you because you only went 6 points. So it's not going to be like it's real hot, like from going 1090 to 1.000, right? Or 0.999. So yeah, you'll be fine, brother. Yeah, is it done and ready to run? I'd say yeah, 1030. If it's not doing anything at this point, I'd run it. I'd rack it and run it for sure. Now let me get back to another question we had here. Um, yeah. Okay. Let me get this chart off here. What is your favorite corn for making whiskey, and do you use any sugar? If I do, just a straight corn. Um, I usually don't get as great a conversion than I do if I add malt to it. I use amylase and stuff anyway. If I don't, I'll use dextrose instead of sugar. If I'm trying to do mostly all grain, um, if I don't get a good conversion, I'll cheat a little bit with a dextrose. And you really won't notice it if you're just using it to bump with. I'm not talking about bringing the gravity up a few points or anything like that heavy. It's just bump it up a little bit more. So, like if I get a 1055 or something, it's a little bit lower than I want. Yeah, I might bump it up one, to 165 or something like that with some dextrose, and then run it. As far as favorite corns, Ohio Blue. I want to try some Oaxacan Green. I hear it's really good. I haven't tried it yet, so that's my next goal is try to get some of that Oaxacan Green. But that and the blue corn's good. Hickory White's great. The red, white, and blue with Jimmy Red, a Hickory White, and a Ohio Blue. Makes a really good red, white, and blue combo that a lot of people love. Which sounds like it's a good combination. Um, but yeah, it's so question watermelon moonshine contest. It's going to be fairly limited. Can we use watermelon flavoring? If you don't know who would, I do, and no. You can use it in like your infusers, but there's no post flavoring at all. So whatever comes off the tap has to be what it is coming off the tap. And like if you've got an infuser and it goes up in elbows and comes down into your shotgun condenser or condenser, you can't put any little chambers in there to catch it before it goes into the condenser either. That was something that has been asked before and something I've thought about too, but that would kind of be cheating. So we don't generally do that. But get back to Carl. Yeah, anytime you do, unless it's like a wine fermentation, and this is a maple syrup wash, which goes pretty quickly, which is one of the reasons you definitely want to add your oyster shells because any of these fermentations that happen really quick, they tend to get acidic pretty quick. And there's a lot of natural organic acids that are, produced as part of the natural fermentation process. So those tend to build up quicker and faster, and sometimes in higher concentrations than like a grain mash or something like that. So, so yeah, you definitely want to add the shells to that, but they go so quickly. A lot of times, airlock isn't going to be a major necessity. It's always good to use. I use airlocks anytime I can, even on some of my big barrels. But for like grains and stuff and things that generally washes and grains that generally ferment off if the temperature's up within 4 or 5 days, yeah, you don't really need an airlock so much with those. You're really not going to worry about, just cover it. I don't leave it wide open for the critters and you know fruit flies and everything else to get into. Last thing you want to do is come out and see a big old possum floating bloated in your mash barrel. But yeah, I just throw it in another bucket and just lay the lid on it. Don't force it down. Just lay the lid on it, and it'll burp out oxygen and it'll hold that CO2 in there to you know efficiently enough to get you done. I agree. Yes, sir. Yes, it will. It will definitely should ferment or and distill into a little bit sweeter. Absolutely. And a lot of people will stop their fermentations or just, when it gets to a certain level, because you can definitely tell if something's on the sweet side of 1.0 or on the dry side. So it does distill over, and there will be a distinct difference in a very dry versus a little bit of sweet distillate for sure. So it can be a great thing, and then a lot of times that'll give you that sweeter rum flavor. So absolutely, brother. Yep. Yeah, I think we figured I think a gallon of blackstrap to and I'm thinking a gallon of blackstrap is like I can't remember the 11 or right at 12, 11.1 or 12.1, somewhere around those. Um, right. Yes, generally a gallon of molasses to 5 gallons of water, I think, get you pretty much get you there. And April said hi. She said hi. I look forward to hearing how it comes out, brother. Let us know what got me started in making shine. Well, I grew up in Eastern Kentucky. If you've never been there, you probably wouldn't understand as much, but it's hillbilly haven. It's the home of hillbilly days, and it's a big moonshining area in Eastern Kentucky, in the mountains of Eastern Kentucky, kind of like West Virginia, Eastern Tennessee, Western North Carolina, in that general area, Virginia, West Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, East Tennessee, Western North Carolina, and that general area is probably the heart of moonshine, and moonshining in America, especially many, many years ago. A lot of moonshine. A lot of my buddies and I, we always, drank it and stuff. But got a Foxfire book when I was young. I was a pretty wild child, and got a Foxfire book and was reading it, and decided to build a little still. So built a little pressure cooker still, and made some moonshine with that. It was horrible, but me and my buddies love it. We drank the hell out of it, and that was the beginning of it. What's going on, Miss Tammy? So that was the beginning of it, and from there, it's just it was horrible shine. It was scorched and basically made with corn meal, sugar, and water and bread yeast. And I scorched the shit out of it first few times. Learned a little bit each time I did, but it wasn't long. I was making pretty decent drink. Hmm. Well, they're probably, I didn't think about that, but maybe using a specific rum yeast may have some of the invertase in it that will allow it to finish dry. But yeah, in that grade, there's a lot of unfermentables, so I'm amazed that it finished dry. It had to be some invertase in the actual yeast that you had that converted some of those unfermentables over, because that's basically about the only thing that's going to um, convert those. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's probably, I don't know about the yellow label angel. I don't know if that goby fungus will do it or not, but well, if you put them in late, it's not going to bring pH up like using a baking soda or a pickling lime. It's basically you want to have those in there from the very start. And what I do is I break up a bunch of the bigger ones. You don't want huge chunks. You want more surface area, and you don't want powder. So I sieve out the powder, and I'll put that in a milk jug with water, and try to let some of that dissolve into the water. But the other ones, I just tie up in a what's the cheesecloth bag, and it's usually a big handful for every gallon. So I mean, you want a pretty good amount, for a 5 gallon bucket. You want a couple of handfuls, maybe, big handfuls, but just make them in like those little bean bags you throw them around. Just make you up a cheesecloth bag, and you can reuse them. So when you get done fermenting, just fish them out of there, rinse them off with some hot water, kill anything off of it, and dry them out. And you can throw it in the next one, or if you got another one ready to go, just throw it in there. But it's not something that works quickly, because that calcium carbonate just won't dissolve in the water real readily. It basically only dissolves when there's an acid to offset it. So it's basically, instead of raising pH, it's neutralizing acids, if you can follow me on that. Whereas baking soda, pickling lime will raise your pH and raise it quickly. This stuff basically just neutralizes acids, much like a stable 5.2 stuff. If you put it on water, it just like floats. It's harder than hell. And you stir it, and it sticks to the spoon. You just really hard to get it to break down in water. So like the powder in the bottom of your bag, I crush it on up fine, and dump that into a water jug, and let that kind of be working over a long period of time. And eventually some dissolves, and when you do that, it can help buffer more quickly. But at the same time, keep in mind that you're adding water. So, you just can't dump a bunch in your wash or your mash to help change your pH, because you're also adding water, and you're going to, reduce a lot of the alcohols in there. So, um, there's a trade off there. But yeah, if you need to change it rapidly, pickling lime probably going to be one of your better choices. Baking soda, everybody has. I mean, it's not going to ruin it. I've had some perfectly fine distillations from something I put baking soda in. Um, but it is going to carry some different flavors and congeners than you would normally have had. So sometimes you just can't get around it. But I wouldn't say not use it, as opposed to letting the acid levels get into the twos and stress your yeast and kill your yeast that way. That'd be worse. So yeah, Anthony, it's not going to drop it real quickly like that. It's just going to help neutralize it, but start out with it. Yeah. Do you think adding a 99 banana to a banana brandy run would help bring out more of the flavor, or use more tails to proof? 99 banana. I'm assuming this is like is this a banana concentrate of some sort? Yeah, concentrate. Yeah. Um, I'd say it'd be fine. If you don't mind a little post, a lot of these things, or in your infuser, definitely can help. But yeah, if you don't mind yellowing, it will give it a bit of a yellow tinge, I'm sure. Um, but yeah, it'll be fine. And using tails to proof will help also keep some of that flavor. Yeah, yeah, it is slow. It is. What's going on, Mr. Hatley? All right, here we go. I'm about to take a still to the Philippines, and my wife's family has an old mango farm. Wow. Western North Carolina, always been around it, but I'm looking to do this for a season. Got any recommendations on setting up the best mango brandy possible? Man, I'm sitting over here gelling, man. Mangoes are generally pretty expensive to ferment with, and a lot of the stuff I've done is just mangoes with something I added to other fruits. It's nothing that I did with just the mangoes. Um, so yeah, it's yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, just find your fruit chart. Let's see if I can find my fruit chart for you. I think mangoes on there. Pretty sure they're on there, but it'll tell you basically how much sugars you have in your. But using your hydrometer really is the best way. So, but this will give you a better idea. And let's see here where we at. Mango. Yeah, should be up here. Yeah, that's a lot of sugar mangoes. Yeah, I know it's going to be. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, just your mango. Break it up. Let's see if my other chart tells you how many per gallon. I don't think that one is. I don't think my chart has. Maybe. Let me erase your question here. Yeah, I didn't think it's going to be in here. But let's see if we can do this. Let's see if we can. Mangoes and bananas are pretty close, and apples, sweet apples. So it's right in between a banana and a sweet apple. So bananas and apples, 3 to 5. I would say 5 pounds per gallon um, would be a good place to start. So 5 pounds per gallon, get it all mashed in good. Use some pectic enzymes to help break it down further and get all those juices out of it. Basically, the pectic enzymes break it down on a cellular level. You've got a lot of cells that hold a lot of this sugar and stuff, and these sugars are naturally held within these cells to feed the seed as the fruit drops. It starts to rot, and the rot creates sugars, and the sugars are consumed by the seed. That gives it the energy to grow before photosynthesis can give it energy. So it gets all these energies from the sugars in the fruit, and all fruits and vegetables are that way. Basically, even the grains are that way. The starches in a corn kernel are basically an endosperm, and that feeds the the growth of the actual seed before it breaks open and can start converting sunlight to energy. So it gets its energy from the sugars that are in there. Same thing with this fruit. It's going to get its energy from that sugar content. And So it breaks it down and it feeds the actual growing process. So yeah, just this pectic enzyme will break down those cells rapidly by eating the outer cellular wall. It eats the cellulose that contain the cell um, that can, the cells wall that built around it. So it eats those and it breaks all these cells open so you can get at everything. Freezing them, we help do the same, basically freezing them. A lot of the sugars and moisture inside these shells, of course, like all water, when you freeze it, like ice cubes, it gets big and so it can bust these cell walls as well. So freezing is another method to help get more juices out of it. You can do both, which is probably the best way. That way you don't have to use as much pectic enzyme because pectic enzymes will increase your heads. And what it's doing, it's eating the cellulose. And anytime you've got cellulose conversion, that's basically like wood alcohol, which is methanol. So you're going to have more fours, heads. And the alcohol that you do, but it's not going to be much. We're talking about a very little amount, and for the amount of flavors that you get from it, it's definitely worth it, especially in certain fruits. Now, like a fruit that's basically like a blackberry, that's basically just tiny, teeny little pods that have all juice in them. Just mashing those out good and stomping them will be fine. Raspberries, all those, but when you get like something thick like peaches, apples that have a lot of cellular thickness, and mangoes would be another one. Yeah, a little bit of pectic enzyme is going to help you break down those cells and open it up and get it all of them. So I'd start at about 5 pounds per gallon and see where that gets you. Smash it all in good. Use your pectic enzymes. Wait 24 hours and then go in there and strain off some juice. It's important to strain off just juice when you take your hydrometer reading. You don't want to drop it just into the mash because all the pulp and other stuff that's in there can affect your reading. Cap, anything like that can affect your reading. So you just want to strain off juice only and check your gravity. And if it's not high enough, you can just mash up more fruit, throw it in there, and bring it on up, to where you need it to be. And if it's, 1070, 1080, which is pretty good, then, you're good to go and just go ahead and pitch your yeast and add some nutrients because there's not a lot of yeast assimilable nitrogen in there or yeast, or fermentables, yan or fan. So definitely want to add some nutrients to that, and it will definitely help things out a lot. But I definitely sounds interesting. Another thing people like to do is when they're done, like a mango habanero seems to be a really popular. So infusion with a little bit of habaneros in an infuser or something like that. Um, I know there's some people. Who was that made that? Somebody won master distiller with that, and I can't remember who it was. They're gonna be mad at me because I can't remember either. I can't remember who it was. Maybe somebody can help me. But yeah, you can experiment with it. But mango, yeah, excellent fruit for that. But it's just really kind of cost prohibitive for me to use just on its own. Use dating in the rum, but one experiment. Yeah, I would try to get some rum specific some yeast that because it may actually contain some invertase that will help you finish it out dry. So yeah, that Fossum, yeah, it's definitely some yum. Get you some for sure. All right. So far, you're impressed with the Angel Yellow label. Um, 5 days in now. Did so you just used a gravity or a poundage that you're used to. So I know you probably do the 2.5 or so pounds, and so because you can't get a starting gravity because you're not gelatinizing the corn, you're not leaching any starches out or anything like that. From the get go, you're just dumping in the meal and at 90 or 100 and letting it cool to 95, and throwing your yeast in, and letting it do its thing. Which is, tell me more. I've got some, and I'm definitely going to give it a shot. Such slacks. I do it in my washes and in rums and things like that. I don't do it in like my grains because I've never had any problem with real quick acid buildup in my grains, because they yeah, anything that high sugar, I'll throw it in. Any kind of washes, any kind of rums, anything that I'm adding a lot of sugar to. We'll definitely always get it. Tequilas, anything like that. It's definitely helpful. I'm better late than never, brother. You ain't that late. Good to see you there, Jeff. You can make a simple syrup and get a banana extract? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can use that in your infuser. The banana 99, and that'll work out well. But I don't, you post flavoring with it. You can do that as well. I've got some that I've used before and experimented with. Hold on, let me see what that is. I'll be right back. Uh, yeah, that must be upstairs. It's not. It's not in there. Must be upstairs with all the stuff. We use it in baking too. So banana 99 is a liquor. Oh, I thought it was a. Oh, cool. I thought it was a. Well, yeah, definitely. Then, yeah, I was thinking it was a concentrate. Cool. My bad. I pulled it up. I thought it was just another concentrate like what I use. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. So if it's a clear liquor, yeah, it'll be fine. You could just mix that with whatever you got going on to help, get the banana flavor. Absolutely. Are they temperamental? Now we go back to the oyster shells. Nah, I just throw them in there at the very beginning of the wash, and generally they go quickly. Most people have issues when you have temperatures that are low, and some of the wine yeasts that prefer low temperatures, and you've got a lower temperature, and they generally ferment more slowly. You might run into some issues, but if then again, EC 1118 is a wine yeast, the champagne yeast actually, but um, maybe a little higher temperature and a little faster work off, and if it works off within a few days, generally the acidity doesn't become as much of a problem because it works off so quickly. But it seems a lot of times if you have these um, washes that take a little bit longer, the acid builds up pretty quickly in them, and then you can run into some stuck fermentations. But yeah, just throwing them in there helps. Anyone ever used the Tribute Superior Equine Nutrition for making rum? Wow, I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm in equine country here, but Tribute Superior Equine. Um, Now, does this have like I would say I'm gonna have to look and try to see what all the what all's in it. Generally, stuff like that doesn't work well if it's got like a lot of mineral supplements in it, especially iron. A lot of iron, but I'm not sure. They've got quite a few different ones, it looks like. So I'm not sure which one. Yeah, they got a lot of different varieties here. This is some I'm not familiar with. But if it's a lot like the pellets and some of the sweet feeds and stuff, it's generally going to be something that you want to kind of stay away from. Is this kind of like a sweet feed that they use for horses, or? Um, but generally, I'm not big on the sweet feeds. um, a lot of times, it's not the best. Sometimes they use unsulfured or sulfured. Sometimes it's the worst grade of corn going into the worst grade of sulfur. I mean, of molasses mixed with it. So um, a lot of times it's really not the best. You can make your own. That usually does a lot better. But any that like the feeds that have the pellets, you definitely want to stay away from. And I'm afraid, some of the supplements and vitamins, might be good for some yeast health, but I've never heard anybody that says anything good about. Okay, so it's just is it just a molasses alone? Just a molasses? Because I'm seeing like mineral supplements that they've got, and a lot of it seems to have a lot of potassium and easy pellet. There's some pellets in some of these. Um, but I mean, it's definitely something to experiment with and try. I mean, you never know till you try, and I mean, it's not probably not real expensive for a bag, so just give it a try. But it's something I'm not familiar with. What's going on? I don't think Trump's a drinker, but there is a case in Texas right now that's going before that district's court, and if so, it may get a Supreme Court ruling. We're watching that and hoping that they'll find it that it's a violation of our constitutional rights to pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So that's kind of one of those things. I do know in some states it is legal. It's kind of like marijuana, federally illegal, but in a lot of states legal, or in some states legal, I should say. Um, so I think right now it's kind of treated like marijuana it was when it was that way, where it's illegal federally and legal in a lot of states. So I think unless you put it in their face, or you're doing some big scale and you get caught, or if you get snitched, I think if you do it at home, keep it at home and consume it at home, and just bring your buddies over and drink, I doubt you'll ever get in trouble. Ain't not making any guarantees, but I do know in some of the states that it is legal. That's basically like in Missouri. That's the stipulations. You're allowed to make it at home, but you have to keep it at home. And there's certain things that you can, like, take it to a wedding or something like that, but I think you have to get a permit for that. So and that's complicated. But for like in Missouri, I think you're allowed two people as long as they're 21 or over in the home. Two max. Each is allowed 100 gallons, so you can have a 200-gallon per year limit on how much you produce. So that basically equates to, if you have two over 21, 200 gallons total in the house, because how the hell are they going to know how much you produce and drink? So I guess that's going to be pretty much you can't have over 200 gallons. It's a lot of shine. That's, 4 barrels. So big barrels full. So that's a lot of moonshine. So hopefully they'll make it legal. I know some people, they make it legal, they'll quit making it. Man, that took all the fun out of it. And then of course the price will drop, and some of them do it for the price. So it'll be like weed, they'll just quit selling it. You can get it at you know a distributor or whatever a lot cheaper than you can buy it on the street. So That'll lower the price down, especially in places like Oklahoma and stuff for weeds cheap as dirt, man. Of course, you know all about that, Mr. Harvest. Oh, now you got me scrolling back to see what we're talking about. Oh, mangoes. I don't think they'd be too temperamental. I think they'll ferment out for you pretty well. Yeah, I know they got a lot of sugar in them, so they should. You could applejack it, but I would just distill it straight out. I think you'll do just fine with it. I mean, especially down there in that warm climate. I think it'll be just fine. And I look forward to hearing that turned out. I'm more interested in figuring out how you're gonna smuggle that steel to the Philippines. You gonna ship it? I don't think you're gonna carry it carry it on. Uh, but yeah, you may be able to buy a Viver or something down there and have it shipped by Amazon or something than cheaper than shipping it yourself. It may be free shipping if you got Prime, just I don't know if they'd ship it there free or not, but what's going on, Larry? Just ran a stripping around on some apple corn. Awesome. I've already done it, but would you recommend soaking apples in the low wines for a couple of days and throwing it all in the still for a spirit run? You can, or if you have an infuser, I really like using the jar infusers or a small thumper with a drain with a port that you can put some flavorings in. I really like using those. So they're small, and you can interchange them if you got a bypass on them, and keep adding flavors as it goes, and keep replenishing it. That works really well for carrying flavors over. Yeah, it definitely it carries flavors over a lot more than just putting it in your mash and running it, or like in a little bag hanging there, like a gym basket bag hanging off the inside the cap or something. These infusers, jar rigs, or you can do the same thing as a jar rig with a copper vessel, that's about the same size as a jar or maybe a little bit bigger. Put a drain on it, and you can go from one, or you can put a jar at the end of it just to catch any puke. That if the two copper ones puke over, you can catch any kind of puke and make a little slobber box out of it or something. But a lot of people are weary of using the glass. And for infusing, if you're going to do that, make sure that the liquid that you're infusing with, make sure it's good and hot when you pour it in there. That way you don't get a temperature shock on that glass and have it break on you. I think that's the biggest problem people have when they're infusing is they pour that juice in there and it's cold and it cracks the jar and everything goes everywhere. And yeah, that. But and applesauce, apple cider, truly, apple cider helps carry a lot of flavor forward. Using like an apple cider with some applesauce in it with a little bit of cinnamon. If you're making some, apple, don't do much cinnamon though, because that really carries forward strong. It'll overpower everything. So, but just a little bit. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think the rum yeast may have some invertase in it that helps break down some of those unfermentables because they're just oligosaccharides that the yeast can't consume, and they say invertase will break down a lot of those unfermentables that's in a lot of the molasses. So I would say a good quality rum yeast may have some of that in it. If not, we need to come up with one that does. Brandy, no, I wouldn't use oyster shells in my wines. I've never had a wine or a fruit like that really get acidic heavily like that. But I mean, you could. Uh, but it's just it's not going to affect anything. It's boil them and make sure they're good and clean. I guess if you use that, you know, star sand, you can put some of that in there to make sure any bacteria in it's killed, and rinse them good, boil them, and clean them up. But yeah, you don't they don't have a taste. They don't partake of place a taste. Um, if you don't rinse them, you might get some salts, from if I'm not sure how they process them, where they get them. So I always clean mine up. I don't trust it. So I've always cleaned them up, washed them, rinsed them well, boiled them, and I break them up into marble sized chunks that are manageable. I don't like any of the big huge chunks because it really doesn't have a lot of surface area. You break them up smaller and you get more surface area in it, and it probably will break down. If it becomes acidic, it'll work a little quicker for you. It's not fast. It's not a fast acting thing at all. It's like the stabilizer 5.2, same exact process. So it's slow, but it just keeps it from becoming too acidic. And people understand now. Most of your yeast is designed to have a large um, temperament to pH. So like 3 to 7, they're fine in that range. Most all of them, and temperature wise the same. So they're pretty flexible. So if you get in the twos on most of them, then you may start running into issues. But in my brandies and my wines and stuff, I'm actually adding a little bit of citric acid in those. So I want them to be a little bit acidic. So I don't use it really in brandies. Not that you couldn't, but I've never really had the need to. It's usually a slow fermentation, a low acid producing fermentation with the yeast and the fruits that I'm using and everything. So I don't really get a lot of acidity other than the citric acid that I also add to it sometimes. Um, so it's not as critical in like a brandy as it would be in like a tequila wash or a rum wash. Really, in the washes where it's just like sugar and water, yeah, it helps a lot in those. Pawpaws. Well, pawpaws are an interesting fruit. It's they found out that there's supposedly a toxin in there, and I think it's called anonymousin. Let me look it up. Uh, let's see. And I'm not sure if anonymousin. It is anonymousin. I thought that's what it was. There's a toxin called anonymousin, but I think that's just if you like to eat them raw. I haven't really researched. Um, I think that the temperature that we distill at would probably kill, or detoxify or neutralize or um, kill off. Well, not kill it because it's going to be more of a chemical, but I think it makes it inert, maybe, I guess you could say. But like eating a lot of pawpaws, it doesn't. So, you don't want to eat a lot. But I'm thinking that. Um, that the temperature of the distillation would probably negate a lot of that or neutralize a lot of those anonymous and toxins. So it's probably going to be okay. I just wouldn't do the wine or a pawpaw brandy, but I'd say a pawpaw shine would be fine. I know they've done it for years, and I don't think I've heard of anybody dying from pawpaw shine, but it does. It's called a nonicin, and you can read about it. But it's I think the temperature. Let me see if let me get the proper ANNO in a non ACIN. Okay, nonicin. Let me see if I can highlight that and copy it. And actually, there's a lot of other things like jatoba seeds. I'm finding out here. There's other fruits that have it as well that I wasn't aware of. I know the pawpaw did, and cherry mora flesh, which is a fruit I've never heard of. Um, yep, it does. So yeah, heat above 50 degrees, which is pretty low Celsius or centigrade. So yeah, pawpaw does have a high concentration of adenosine, which is toxic to cortical neurons, which is a neurotoxin. But yeah, the may still be present after heating as evidence a tea, but that was just a tea, and that's Reddit too, so I'm really not gonna be something interesting to research. Getting mixed results on heat of neutralization, which is heat release 1 gram. Yeah, I'd go to some kind of pharmaceutical research or some really reliable source of information. I'm thinking that the temperatures that we get to in distillation, up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, I think that's going to pretty much detoxify that anonymous. Um, I had no idea it was a liquor, banana liquor. I thought it was another one of those concentrates. I bought some of the concentrate to experiment with some banana. I'm going to do some, with some peanut butter, that powdered peanut butter. I'm going to try to do a just with that. I'm going to try to make just a basic rum, or maybe a sugar wash, and put the peanut, because I hear it makes it, the peanut butter stuff can make it, powdered peanut butter can make it very bitter. So I don't want to really ruin a good mash. So I may try to do some sugar shine with some of that concentrated banana stuff, and some of that powdered peanut butter infusions, just to see how close to Nick's I can get with just that. Because I do like that Nick's shine is pretty good. I like that peanut butter, that banana peanut butter. Yeah, I'd prefer it too, brother. Definitely. Mark, what I came up with years ago, I'm the one that I guess invented the bypass back in the '80s. I used to use the thumper a lot, and I would start it out, with tails. I used always put tails in my thumper, but I always got some heads, um, smearing. It seemed like throughout most of the run, I was using a cake steel with a thumper, and so I decided that I'm probably getting that from running my four shots and my heads through my thumper and then building up in the thumper and then blending, smear. I called it blending at the time. I didn't know the technical term of smearing, but I felt that's what was causing it to blend and smear over. So I designed the bypass to where heads and four shots and heads, I should say, go straight to the condenser and out. And once I get to the hearts, I would open the bypass and send that into my thumper that has tails in it. And of course, you'll get some build up, and before it heats up again, and it'll redistill, and it takes a little bit more time. Or you can actually heat it up a little bit, and not as much to where you're going to cook it off, but get it pre-warmed if you wanted to. And I played with that a bit too. But to just infuse, that into the hearts, and I got a lot less smearing. With infusing and using the jar rigs, it's essential to have that bypass, so you can bypass your jars, take your jar off, dump it, re-infuse with some fresh hot infusion juice, whatever you're using, flavorings, and then screw it back on, open up your bypass, and continue that process. And it, just makes it easier taking off the jars so you don't get a lot of vapor. But I created that bypass to prevent all this acetone and ethyl acetates and all this stuff from building up inside the inside your thumper or your infusion jars. And I shared this technology on the Moonshine group with North Georgia Steel and all them probably shoot maybe 5 6 years ago, and ever since then, a lot of people are now coming up with thumpers that have the bypass infusion jars with the bypass, and it helps a whole lot to prevent that buildup from happening. So yeah, using a bypass definitely will help keep it. As far as going starting dry, no, I didn't start dry. I always just put tails in there and just to increase production, and didn't really do a lot of flavor. Didn't do any flavoring, actually adding or anything like that until much later. But when I did the bypass, it was just to bypass the fours and heads from getting in my thumper and smearing it throughout the run and creating a lot more heads and a bad flavor. It definitely helps the flavor profiles out a lot. But I just did pretty much tails. But as as the internet came along, and I think Rick Gibson and Phil Billy, when they came up with the infusers and then adding an infusion chamber or a port to infuse in your thumpers and infuse flavors with, um, that bypass technology certainly helps a lot with those as well. Anytime, brother. Okay, good question, Hillbilly. What I do with the grain, right when you first get ready to pitch your yeast. So after you've done all your conversions, everything's ready, it's cooled down, you're getting ready to pitch your yeast, stir the ever living fuck out of it. I mean, oxygenate it. I use a mud mixer on a drill, and I'll pull it out of the liquid just to the surface and chop the surface up a lot to create a lot of oxygenization, and then I'll drop it down in there to pull some of it down, and I'll keep doing that. You really want to create as much oxygen bubbles and oxygenate it as much as you can, because when you pitch that yeast in there, the first thing you want to happen is you want that environment to be aerobic, or contain a lot of oxygen, and that oxygen in the yeast get that oxygen and it kicks them into a breeding cycle. So A, you can get by with using a little bit, get less yeast, but B, it decreases the time of fermentation because you've got a lot more yeast working early. So vigorously stir the shit out of it with that mud mixer and drill, get it really oxygenated, pitch your yeast, and then as soon as you start seeing the cap rise, couple few times a day, just gently push. Not Don't mix it up, because after your first day or two, you don't want any more oxygen in there. It becomes an anaerobic, and you want it to have zero or least oxygen that you can, because oxygen will promote bacterial growth, and your yeast don't need it at this point because they've bred. They don't need the oxygen, and what little they do need, they'll get. So it'll cut down on your bacterial growth, but gently push that cap back down and keep it moist. And the alcohol, damn, I need a drink. My throat's getting scratchy. One way to fix that. Good Bloody Butcher Sour Mac. So oxygenate the shit out of it, and then just gently. They call it punching the cap down, but you really don't. Punching sounds like violent and really disturbing, but you just gently press the cap down. That's called punching it. But you can use a spatula if you don't want to get your hand dirty. I just use a spatula, metal spatula, and just press it down just to the liquid till you can see the liquid come up above it and all that. And do that like a few times on the first day, as soon as you see the cap develop. I do it for the first few days, and then I'll let it go. And generally 5 or 6 days, it's pretty much done. If all the parameters are right, temperature's right, pH is right, if everything's right, it should ferment out for you in about 5 days. I think distilleries have it down, and they use special yeast and stuff, but they do like 4 days, 3 or 4 days. So you should get a pretty quick fermentation. But yeah, just keep it moist, and that moisture helps keep alcohol all over it. It gets your yeast, to any sugars that are built up in that cap. It lets the yeast get to that, so you get a little bit more fermentation going on. Finish a little drier for you, and that moisture helps hold in the CO2. It doesn't let the gas escape as easily, so it helps hold in CO2 and keeps the oxygen from the outside from getting in once it's moist. So yeah, all those is a benefit of pressing the cap down or punching the cap. But just do it easy, and you really don't want to stir it after day one, unless of course you have to. If it's a longer fermentation, it's lower temperature, it's going to take a long time. The pH is 2.4, and it's just stressing the fuck out of your yeast. Yeah, you're going to have to use some old baking soda, which we don't like to use if you've got to put the oyster shells in there. So yeah, you're going to have to use that. It's going to cause a few little issues, but you're going to have to stir that in a bit to help it make it work better. So it's not optimal conditions, but with your grains, that shouldn't really happen that way. Um, but yeah, just gently press it down, and it's not a must, unintended, but yeah, you can do that. Mason jars and infuser they'll be using as well as apples in the pot. Awesome. I'd make me up I'd use some applesauce and some apple cider and sweeten it up and put a little bit of cinnamon in there. You'd be good to go, brother. I hope it turns out. I have some apple wine base. Would it work good in a corn mash instead of dextrose? Actually, either way, it's just according to what you like. Um, I think most people prefer like an apple rye that have tried different combinations and played with things a lot. I think a lot of people prefer like an apple rye. That seems to be a really popular combination instead of corn. Mountain brandies, there's nothing wrong with corn, but you get a good corn flavor and then an apple flavor. And if you think the two of those combined would be something of interest, I mean, it's just an opinion thing, really. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just whether or not that combination appeals to you or not. Um, Seems like a lot more people kind of prefer an apple rye, which is a spicier apple and works well together. Me, I love good corn liquor, obviously, and and I love a good corn flavor. But apple corn, just opinion, just pure opinion for me, not so much. It's just the two kind of. I can't imagine the two together. I've never done them together. Um, Apple rye works pretty well, but I mean, I'm sure there's people out there that's done the apple corn and it come through and just blow your mind, But I've never drank any apple corn mountain brandy. It's always been an apple rye. Um, but give it a try. I mean, when it comes to questions like that, really, there's no right or wrong answer, Rick. It's just whatever you would prefer. Um, Dextrose, I love dextrose. I love using it. If you're just going to make like an apple brandy, dextrose is great. But it's going to be more of a brandy than a mountain brandy. Now, when you're using corn mash, if you kind of it's a little bit different, whereas you're getting a corn flavor, whereas dextrose has a very neutral flavor. Um, so, hey, Lisa, you can come up in East Kentucky. There's lots of pawpaws. Yeah, I'd say that anonymous would be destroyed from the heat. I'm not going to guarantee it because I'd hate for somebody to make a bunch and find out that heating it up concentrates it or some shit, and they hurt themselves from it. But I do know that people have been eating pawpaws for freaking ever, and I don't know if anybody's ever died from it, but they say it's a neurotoxin. It can be carcinogen, a cancer causing thing as well. So I don't know. I do know that I've read about it, that anonymous, and I do remember that. Um, so I'm kind of weary because of that. Um, and I don't eat pawpaws anymore, but they're okay. I mean, after you've eaten them, it's kind of okay, whatever. I just get a banana and mix it with some other fruit. And I'm watching a ghost light at a house across the main road. It's flipping weird. Noticed it a couple weeks ago and haven't seen it since tonight. A ghost light. What's a ghost light, bro? What's going on, Dave? Hey, Jacqueline, how are you tonight? Glad y'all could join us. But yeah, apple rye seems to be pretty popular. So I tried apple rye. Are you a big fan of rye, Rick? And are you trying to make? Are you going to make apple pie or just some apple brandy? Because if you're just going to make a good apple brandy, I would. Pawpaw is a fruit. It's like a banana, and I'm trying to think of the other fruit they call it. It's like a banana and something else mixed. Um, we used to eat it when I was a kid, but it's yeah, it's like a mango banana pineapple kind of. That's what they say here. I never really got the pineapple, but it's like a mangoey banana would be a good way of putting it. I didn't eat a lot of mangoes as a child in Eastern Kentucky, another expensive fruit that doesn't really grow there well or at all, or pineapples. But it was just a banana-ish kind of odd. It's good. They're good. But yeah, they only grow in certain places and in a short growing season. So it's something that never really took off. And it's interesting to see, there's a lot of fruits and vegetables and just regular plants for that matter that are better for us than a lot of the plants that we eat, but they just never took off or are difficult to grow or have the range in which they grow is considerably less, so it just wasn't favorable for farming, or they didn't keep for a long time. But there's a lot of fruits and vegetables and stuff that and especially some what are considered weeds now that have a lot more vitamins and minerals than some of the stuff that we grow and eat. Go figure. And pawpaw is probably one of those kind of forgotten fruits, but um, because they have such a small growing season and they're very limited into the range in areas that they actually do grow. So I'm sure that contributed to them not being a really popular. Yeah, rye, it'll add some spice and some interesting flavors to anything, and that's, I guess, why a lot of people like these moths down here. um, so a lot of people like using rye with a lot of different things. I mean, I like adding oats. I like throwing oats into a lot of different things for the softness and the creaminess that it adds. Seems to help take the bite out of just about everything. Makes it softer, a little better mouthfeel. So I'll throw oats in about all my grains. I don't even, a lot of times I forget to count it. I'll say, oh yeah, I'm running 3 grain. I'm running a little corn, barley, and wheat. And I wouldn't even think of oats as another grain that's in there. I just throw them in there, you know. But yeah, oats are good to run with a lot of things as well. Don't use a lot. Get a messy, as can wheat and some of the rye and others. But yeah, it's fun to experiment with a lot of grains and stuff. And I definitely can't wait to do some experimentation this year. We're starting to get warm enough here at night, um, where my temperatures don't swing too much, so I can ferment in my barrels outside. I do a little bit of fermentation inside, but it's generally in a 5-gallon fermenters. Yeah, we're still getting in the 40s, man, here in the evenings. Let's see, this next week, 49.62, 47.58, 47.60 for the low and highs. It's just not quite there yet, man. And then the next thing you know, it's going to be freaking 80, 90 the whole damn time. And it's going to be warm, yeah. Yeah, Gordon, I think temperature will eat that in Austin. That's something I'm going to do some research on. I don't want to sit here and bore everybody while I read all about it and have dead air. But yeah, I'm definitely going to try that out. So what else everybody got running? Well, you could also, have you ever done apple jack? That's an interesting way of maintaining a lot of apple flavor. If you're not wanting a real high proof, it's kind of like a fortified wine, basically. Sugar beets. Yeah, beet sugar. That's very common. A lot of people don't prefer the beet sugar. They say that they prefer the cane sugar of the beet sugar. They tend to think that beet sugar is a little hotter for some reason. I've never done a controlled experiment on that and done just the two to see if one's hotter than the other one or one works a little better than the other. Um, but they're an excellent source of sucrose. It just depends. Generally with brandies, not so much with the fruits. Primarily because a lot of times when I'll make brandies, I make them with the intent of having a good wine. And if it turns out to be a really good wine, I'll stop it at that point and it won't ever hit the distiller. Um, because I also like wine a lot. So if I come up with a really, really good wine, I don't want to have oats in it. I don't want to have all that oated, you know. So I generally don't do it in my brandies. I do it just with like my grains. Um, so, but I mean, you could do it if you're going to be doing it with something that you're for sure going to be distilling. So if you wanted to throw it in like with a rum wash, that would be perfectly fine. It would soften that up. Um, or I don't know, tequila maybe. Who knows? Be good to experiment with, but like with my brandies, I don't because I try to make if it really good, I'll make a wine out of it, and if it's just yeah, I ferment it. So that's where a lot of my I don't say mistakes or bad wine goes, but if it's just not spectacular and it's not knocking my socks off, then I'll just distill it and make some brandy. Yeah, a lot of people don't like the beet sugar. And I guess a lot of candy makers and stuff don't like it either. I've read, and I guess that's why when it's made with beet sugar, they don't advertise it. In the bag, beet sugar. You never see beet sugar on the bag. You always see, table sugar or white sugar or something like that. You don't really see table sugar. You don't really see them advertising beet sugar. So a lot of times you have to look on the label to see if it's made with your um, canes instead of beets. But Rick, if you've never tried inverting sugar, try that. Not with beet sugar. Try it with get some cane sugar and invert that, and it makes it's even sweeter than regular sugar. A lot of your pastry chefs and a lot of candy makers and stuff will use an inverted sugar. Basically, you take a table sugar, which is a glucose and a fructose bonded together in a disaccharide, and you use acid and heat to break the glycosidic bond to create two molecules, a separate glucose and a fructose molecule separates them, and it makes monosaccharides. And your yeast love that shit. They love monosaccharides. That's dextrose is a glucose, just a pure single monosaccharide of glucose alone. And that's why the yeast love them so much. They can just consume them so easily. A disaccharide they can still consume. It's a little bit tougher for them, and it takes a little longer. So it takes a little longer to work off. That's why a lot of times their fruit generally takes a little longer to work off than just like a pure glucose. So um, potatoes and beets, Russian spirit called Baba Yaga, elixir of youth. Baba Yaga. That sounds like a person. That sounds like one of those swamis. Baba Yaga. Elixir of youth. Never made it, but I'd try it, man, just to see what happens. Why not? Potatoes, make sure you use your amylase though to help convert your potatoes and stuff starches. A lot of people think that you can just mash in potatoes and throw in a little sugar and it's good to go. But you always got to remember, anytime you're converting your starches, you're going to have to use enzymes to break down those starches to make them fermentable. So I don't care if it's from any kind of fruit that's a starch, like if you want to try to break down the starches in your banana, as well as just the sugars in the banana. Yeah, a little enzyme helps that. Any vegetable or grain that has starches, cholesterols, whatever that you're going to try to break down, you got to have amylase. So break them down. She's a witch. Sounds like it. Nothing wrong with witches though. Might be some out there listening. You never know, buddy. That'll make those little voodoo dolls, slacks. But yeah, that'd be interesting, brother. Let me know how that works out. It'd probably be pretty good. 20% for my grain masses. You start out at 20%. That's pretty high, bro. There's not a lot of yeast that are gonna be able to work. EC 1118 get you to 18 to 20. That's definitely max. So you could cut back on your sugars a little bit. Oh, 20%. Okay, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, damn, 20% alcohol. You up there, bro? Yes, I met your wife. Also, Lisa's on here, so she's the ditch witch. You better watch, buddy. That's what you say about two witches. What's going on, Jeff? What's up, brother? Yeah, oats. I love oats, man. Yeah, I use them all the time, especially in grains. Yes, I met her. She put a spell on you, didn't she? That's funny. All right, somebody else come up with some questions. Need something to chatter about. Yeah. I knew you were listening. You're gonna put the hex on you, man. Make a little Slacks voodoo doll. Oh, that's funny. Let's see here. Take care of something right there. Want to learn about brandies? Okay, Jeff. The best way to approach brandies is to just learn about wines, because basically the better that you can make a wine, the better brandy you're going to end up with. So I was a grain. I was all about grains for probably 30 years before I started making wines and stuff and getting more into brandies and wines and stuff. And I was just about all grains and no sugar conversions and all that kind of stuff, and just about grains. And actually, for a lot of it, probably my first 15, 20 years, it was just basically corn milled corn, and a little bit of sugar and water and bread yeast. Just they call it a thin mash, and it makes a decent little corn liquor. It's not the best, but it's quick and easy, and that's all this old country boy knew how to do. It wasn't on the internet to help me. I didn't, I had a Foxfire book. There not a lot of there wasn't a lot of distilling books, and not a lot of information easily obtained about the topic and subject. I did have some chemistry and biology classes that helped open my eyes a bit and learn a little bit more about it. But when the internet came along, it was huge. It was, there was news groups was kind of the first thing, and then GeoCities came along, and then after that, there were billboards and news groups in the beginning, and then GeoCities, and I guess after that, Distiller.org kind of came along. I got a lot of information from all those as time passed, but I guess back in the news groups was really the first um, info that I was able to obtain, and I guess that was in the late '90s, mid to late '90s. Um, so that was really my introduction to a lot of other grain conversions and things of that nature, and using amylase and malting and things of that nature. Kind of it helped open my eyes to some more, got into grains, thin, heavy, and more into grains. So I started getting into all that, and then as time passed, once you start getting a little older, you can't just drink the hard stuff all the time. So getting old, I started thinking more about wines. Maybe slow down a little bit and enjoy some wines and learn to make some wines. And my fiance likes wines, and wasn't so much into the hard stuff. She prefers the wines. So I started learning more about wines for me, and eventually her. And but I noticed that a lot of the information I was getting from the the distilling and moonshine groups really wasn't the same as what I was getting from a lot of the wine groups. So I started focusing. If you want to learn to make wine, you go to a wine group. You don't go to a moonshine group, right? You want to learn to make beer, you go to a beer group that specializes in beer, and not necessarily just a moonshine group. Because um, a lot of times you just get sometimes. Well, I'm not going to say all in all, but generally you get a little bit of information, especially some of the places I was going for the wines and stuff, and had a lot of vintners in there that made, that were winemakers by profession and stuff. So I got a lot of info from them and learned about winemaking and got really into it and read into it and learned a lot about it. And that's really teach you a lot of good practices that you can carry over to grains as well, as far as, keeping things clean. Not, I know a lot of people, oh, you don't need an airlock and all that. You don't for grains, but keeping things clean to cut back on lacto. A lot of people consider lacto an awesome thing, and it is at certain stages of fermentation, but you don't want it early. So you don't want it infecting everything that you have, and you don't want it starting early. But just keeping things and keeping wild yeast at bay, so you can focus on the yeast that you're using. What's the purpose in going out and buying a good high quality yeast if you're just going to allow a bunch of wild yeast that could be good or bad? It could be horrible tasting yeast. Not all wild yeast is good. In fact, most of them aren't that good. So you learn a lot about the discipline and keeping things clean and preventing wild yeasts, and how to treat the fruit to get, because a lot of your fruits will have wild yeast on them, especially grapes. That white powdery stuff that's on the outside of your grapes, that's the wild yeast. You don't want that. Most grapes don't really have the best wild yeast on them. A lot of the raisins that you see people, that's another thing I don't like. A lot of people talk about using raisins as a nutrient. Don't do it. Just don't. I know a lot of people back in the old days would throw a bunch of raisins in there and they think it helped feed them, and it doesn't. And it says, "Oh, my fermentation is a lot better." Well, yeah, because they're covered in wild yeast, and wild yeast tend to work off faster and quicker, but they don't ferment really dry a lot of times. So, it ferments better when I add those raisins, so it's better. And no, it's not. And they don't really provide a lot of nutrients. But yeah, if they did, a lot of winemakers wouldn't have spent millions of dollars developing diammonium phosphate with, urea and other things in it to help feed the yeast and come up with Fermaid and Fermo and Fermax and all these different nutrients for their fermentations. If there was something that simple, they would have used it. But yeah, that's learn. Go to some of these wine sites and not on Facebook, anything like that. Do a Google search and look for, like, wine institutes and some really heavy scientific and informative and some experienced, where you get a lot of experienced vintners. Some of your groups will have it, and I'm sure there are some really good Facebook groups that have vintners that run big, huge vineyards, that'll be happy to help educate you. Um, but but yeah, that'll definitely be a good heads up for you, and and a good learning experience. So learn about winemaking, and then just making brandies. That's just take your wine, put it in your distiller, and distill it like you would any other wash or mash. And it's called a must. When you're doing brandies, your mash is considered, called a must. When you're doing grains, it's called a mash. And when you're doing like tequilas and rums, it's called a wash. So that's one of the first things in beers. Um, so that's one of the first things that they'll teach you is it's a must. So they'll browbeat you if you call it a mash. I'm just warning you. Because I thought when I went in there, I was like, yeah, I want to know how to mash in some of these fruits. They're like, it's must. It's a must. It's not mashing. So yeah, they might browbeat you. Just don't tell them you're a moonshiner and you'll be all right. Yeah, I enjoy making a lot of wines and drink a lot of wines. I've got cherry wines are really good. I make um, of course, I've had apple wines, I've got peach wine, blueberry wine, blackberry wine. Um, I've got a white grape wine that's really good. I call it Sweet Heat, and it's really good. That's one my fiance likes the most. But we found out she's got diabetes, so she doesn't get to drink very much of it. She can have a little sippy sip every once in a while, but we try to keep that keep that cut back. But plums also make a really, really good wine. So, you know, they're very interesting. I used to drink a Japanese plum wine, so I'm like, interesting. I'm gonna have to try some plums, and they make damn good wine and damn good brandy. Um, Found out in some of uh, Western Europe and some of the Russian bloc areas, they call it a slivovich. The plum wine distillate, when it's distilled into a brandy, is called slivovich, and it's pretty good. I'm sure I'm butchering that pronunciation, but yeah, yeah. Who doesn't like a good wine? I enjoy drinking them. So there's a lot to make a wine, if you want to learn about it, ask questions. I've read and learned quite a bit about winemaking, and I probably know about as much as that as I do with grains and other stuff now. So I really think I'm like obsessive compulsive. So when I get into something, I have to know everything there is to know about it, and really just focus and throw myself completely into it, and and really. Welcome back, Kimbo. What costs too much? Jamie, I probably agree with you, brother. We try to keep the conversations non-political and non-religious in here, but yeah, I agree. Well, now high desert, don't they? What's that? Cactus pears. I heard those make really nice wines. So that's something that you can experiment with that they say is really good. And give me agave. Maybe you can get some tequila going out there. Raisins, yeah, yeah. They give you a kind of like oats. Um, they add to the mouthfeel. I'm not saying using raisins is bad, so don't get me wrong. It's just don't use them for nutrients and expect them to do what you need them to do. They don't have the yin and fan, uh, but they do add a little mouthfeel. So it's not a waste to use them. It's just that a lot of times um, people talk about them in distilling and in making a lot of different liquors and stuff. They talk about using them for a nutrient. They're just not a complete nutrient. I'm sure there might be some minerals and some things in there that can be used. It's just not enough and even close. I think, like we talked about tomato paste, it's the same. There's some things in there that are beneficial, but both lack yin and fan, which is yeast assimilable nitrogen and fermentable amino nitrogen. So you don't get either of those. What's going on, Richard? Hope you're having a good evening. Uh-oh, stenosis. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, brother. I hope you get to feeling better. I'm not even. I'm googling stenosis. I've heard of it, but this is spinal stenosis. I hate to hear it, brother. I hope you get to feeling better soon. I've been getting what's that? What's that nerve that goes down your back, out down your butt cheek, and into your leg? What's that nerve, babe? Sciatic, the sciatic nerve. I've been getting some sciatic nerve pains in the last couple of weeks, man. They're pretty bad. Man, it won't be long. I'll just have her on here doing the damn podcast because I won't be able to remember anything. She sits back here and listens to everything, so she's probably going to be a little authority on it for long. Yeah, yeah, my sciatic nerve. It's bad, you know. Absolutely, Dave. Don't give up all the secrets, brother. That's one of the secrets right there. Yes, but yeah, adding cream corn to your jars, like we were talking about infusing the flavor. Add a little sugar and cream corn to your jars will definitely impart some good corn sweetness to your corn liquor. Yeah, Richard, I hope you get feeling better. All right. Now I just noticed. Okay, 52 to 60. Thanks, Curtis. So yeah, 52 to 60. So it's going to be about the same as the gold barrel then. So I think the gold might be a little less, but that's good to know. And I know you sent that a long time ago. I'm sorry. I'm bad about checking Facebook. I just sit here and look at StreamYards, and if I get off that, I'll go to Google to check something out or um, to get more information on it so I can help provide watermelon, cucumber, ginger. Damn, bro, that sounds good. Sounds real good. Love me some Yukon Gold. That's one of my favorite ones to eat. Those in the red skin. They're just like the plain. I am drinking Bloody Butcher Sour Mash Select. And a little what's left of damn, I'm about out of peach brandy. I'm gonna have to get me another little jar. I've got a few gallons of it in there. It's 100 proof. This Bloody Butcher Sour Mash, I think it's like 120. It's got a little bite to it. Watermelon, cucumber, ginger. Sounds like a very interesting combination. Did the watermelon carry forward pretty good? Too far north for agave. The cactus are not good at high altitude. Over 7,000. Yeah. Yeah. Um, distilling, it's the same. You just have to take your temperatures up a little higher. So, the boiling point of water goes up and everything goes up a little bit. So you just have to increase your temperatures a little bit, but it should be fine. But a lot of people don't realize that, temperature wise and altitude wise. I mean, how it changes the temperature boiling points. Yeah. Yeah. Perfectly fine for rum making. Yeah. You just don't want to get that lowest grade and definitely don't want to get anything that's sulfured. Definitely stay away from anything that's sulfured. A lot of times they'll get premature. A lot of times the premature cane, it'll still be kind of green, and they process a little differently, and they sulfur it, and it's just not as good. It's used for a different purpose. So, I mean, for the purposes that they use it for is fine, but it's just it doesn't make for good um, pastry, cookies, or rums. It's not really good for that. Cool. So did you make a watermelon mash, or is this just infused on a neutral? Salted caramel corn. Now, is that what you? I use. I think Tyranny makes a salted caramel corn flavor. I use good stuff. So, Roy, did you do this with a neutral, or did you mash in watermelons, make a brandy with it, or just use it with corn or whatever, and use jars? Welcome to my world, brother. My first one tasted like shit too. My first one, I scorched the cornmeal when I heated it up to add sugar. I didn't know to start with boiling water and add the sugar, and then throw the cornmeal on top of that. So I kind of learned the hard way about that. It's all a learning process. But sounds good, brother. All right. So what did we start out with, brother? What did you ferment? So let's start out with what was your basic fermentation and what was your process. We can get you to the end where you're making some pretty good stuff. So you start out with apples. Okay. Now on the apples, you ground them up, and how many pounds of apples and how much water, and did you add sugar and pectic enzymes? That's the next question. Cool. Sounds good. Yeah, I use it in the diffuser and in post flavoring to make drinks. The Tyranny. All right, Urban. So with the apples, so you just mulched up the apples, and did you add water to them and sugar, or use apple juice, apple cider? 3 pounds of apples, 5 gallons of water. Okay. Um, it's going to be pretty light on the apples. What you want to do next time, instead of using water, just use apple juice, and make sure it's the just 100% apple juice. Make sure it doesn't have potassium sorbate or potassium bisulfate, or what's the other one? Sorbate, metabisulfate, and benzoate, sodium benzoate. Yeah, try to use apple juices next time instead, or apple cider works too. That way you're not diluting anything with your water. Also, we have do you have a hydrometer triple scale? That'll help you measure the amounts of sugar that you have in your mash or wash or must. Cool. So just use that, and a lot of people just use apples and just apple juice and then sugar, but just heat it all up, apples and everything, a little just a little bit of pectic enzyme will help break those apples up a little better and get some more apple flavor out of it. But heat them up, kill off any bacteria or wild yeast or anything on 160-degree water, pouring over the apple puree or whatever works just fine. 160 plus generally kills about everything that you have to worry about. And then you can mix your sugar into that hot water, and you can start with a recipe that'll get you pretty close to a certain gravity. Just make sure that you allow the temperatures to drop before you take a gravity reading, or if you don't, make sure that you use your conversion chart for temperature adjustments, because I think they're based on a pretty low temperature, like 60 or something. So be sure to use your little chart that adjusts for your gravity readings. But with just apple juice and a little apple cider, apples, and then some sugar, let that work off, and then just rack off the, you can get a sieve in there and get all the apples out of it once it's done. Try not to disturb the yeast bed in the bottom, and just rack that off into another vessel. And let, I use a big 5-gallon water jug, those little light blue ones that you get, you turn upside down in those little water dispenser things that you see at the offices. I get those, clear jugs, and you can get like a number 10 stopper with a single hole, number 10 stopper with a single hole, and you can use that for your airlocks you're so inclined. I like using them because they, cover it up, and it works well. And you're not sealing it entirely, but and just let it work off, and let everything settle, and just you siphon it off with the hose. I use a silicone hose to siphon with, so a little 1-inch. And they make some vinyl stuff too that's designed for um, alcohol. You're welcome, Mitch. Drop in anytime, brother. We love having you here. It's great just to sit and listen and pick up some knowledge. If you have any questions, be sure to ask them, brother. But yeah, once you get your gravity right, and pick a good yeast, and throw a little nutrient in there, and you can use diammonium phosphate. You can get a bag on Amazon for, it's like 11 or 12 bucks for a pound. That pound will last you a long, long time, and unless you run a whole bunch of liquor, and you use just such a small amount. It's next to nothing. It's little teaspoonfuls. So you're not using a whole lot, and they're really a good nutrient that has most everything you need in there for a healthy yeast fermentation. So that'll help it out a lot. I, I wouldn't really worry about the oyster shells in this. It's not going to be one of those that's going to be an issue. But if you want to use them, you can. But yeah, just let that work, and try to get a pH of around 5.3-ish to start with. Yeah, but if jump in the Moonshine Militia on Facebook, and we can get you going. But yeah, starting out that way should get pretty good. With gravity about a 1060, 1070 with a little bit of sugar or dextrose or whatever you want to use to sweeten it with. We'll get it up there. Do you have a thumper? You're welcome, brother. Yeah, jump in here. We're here on Wednesdays and Saturdays at start 8 Eastern. So jump in here anytime, or else join the militia and ask your questions there. There's a lot of people there that'll help you. Yeah, Richard, the oyster shells, they're calcium carbonate. So, just you can buy them like 15, or I think it's like 45 or 50 pound. They're heavy bags. I'll have to look at it. But it's like maybe 45 or 50-pound bag at not that much. Surely it's not that much. It's a bag about that big. They're like 12, 15 bucks at Tractor Supply, maybe 40 pounds. But it's used for your chickens to help keep their calcium up. They use it in the chicken feed to help keep the calcium up, and makes their eggs good and solid. And boil them. clean them up and boil them, and that'll kill off any bacteria in them or anything. And it just helps buffer. It's just a buffer. It won't like, it's not great for like boosting pH, but it'll prevent it from dropping real low. You follow me? So once things become so acidic, it'll start dissolving this calcium carbonate out of the shells, and it will prevent it from getting real low to where it'll affect your yeast. So it's not really something that's going to boost pH. It's just a buffer to prevent high acidity. So if you use the thumper, you can Urban, if you use the thumper, you can put some apple cider in the thumper to help carry some flavor forward. And also, once you get a little bit further along, we'll teach you about saving your tails and putting those in your thumper as well to help boost your production. Yeah, they're cheap. I wouldn't personally collect them. And I'll talk about that and say I wouldn't personally collect them because I know the ones that you get out in the ocean have a lot of salts in them, and they've got a lot of critters that crawl into every little pore, and there's always going to be some, algae and stuff in them and shit. So it's really probably I just buy them, and I'm not sure how they process them when they bag them up. I'm not sure really what they do to clean them up, if they do much at all. Um, but I like rinsing them, and then I boil them. First of all, I break them up into smaller pieces. I want them in big hunks, so I hammer them and bust them into smaller pieces. You can get an old pillowcase and bust them up inside of it, hammer it, and break them into smaller bits. So you get more surface area. And anything real fine, I just throw it in a water jug and to make a buffering solution. And that'll actually help change pH. But bust them up and put them in a cheesecloth bag. Make your little bag out of cheesecloth, or just wrap it in it and tie it. And it'll just help, but boil them, that make sure any kind of bacteria or anything in there's gone. If you got star sand, you can probably drop them in a little star sand, let them soak a while, then rinse them off, throw them in some boiling water, and make sure they get rinsed good and clean. And yeah, people bake them, same with eggshells. You have to do the same with eggshells. But it's great for gardening. It's great for your chickens, and it's great for buffering, mashes that become acidic, like we were talking earlier about some of your tequila washes, some of your rum washes, your sugar shines, and things that are, really high sugar concentrate that tend to work off really quickly, because those high sugar fermentations produce a lot of organic acids and stuff that cause the pH to just crash. They call it a pH crash. So what's going on, Michael? I'm actually Bad Santa. I'm not Phil Billy. I just streamed to his channel. But glad you're here with us. Let's see what you got going on. Tried ground corn from a local grain shop. It was easier to strain and made really good shine. Awesome. 2-row pale and some chocolate malt to convert. The chocolate malt and some of your specialty malts won't convert real well, because they've been a lot of times the enzymes in them, amylase enzymes in them, have been denatured through some of the malting processes when they heat them up and stuff. So I try to, you go ahead and good idea to go ahead and use some high temp alpha amylase, and that works. And then instead of using your malts, or just use your malts, but supplement that with a little liquid glucose. That way you really don't have to worry about the enzymatic diastatic power of your malts, and you can just use them for flavor, and you don't really have to worry about their diastatic powers to help for conversion at all. But that's one of the beauties of using the exogenous enzymes, is that you don't have to really, you can use some specialty grains that may have been denatured, and use 2-row instead of 6. That way you can get better flavoring, because 2-rows generally have a lot better flavor than the 6-row. Most all your beer makers, they don't like 6-row at all, and they like the flavors of a 2-row, and that helps carry over into a distillation as well, and in your mash. So Um, question is, what difference is there between using ground and cracked corn? Also, is ground corn pretty much cornmeal? Okay, good questions. Um, Cracked corn, when you buy a bag of cracked corn, the problem with it is, and it is perfectly fine to use. So don't get me wrong. Let's start. It's awesome to use. Um, Number two, yellow made almost 99% of the time. It's a yellow dent number two that's been cracked. Perfectly fine. The problem is we don't know when it was cracked and bagged. So once it's cracked and you've got the outer shell of that kernel broken, it begins to oxidize. Just basically, also kind of like a coffee bean. Once you grind up that coffee bean, you really need to use it pretty soon, or else it starts to oxidize and it kind of loses its efficacy. And it's the same thing with a cracked corn. So if it was something from a year ago that it's been sitting on somebody's shelf and it was the last bag of last year's or something like that, and it's getting pretty stale. So that can affect your flavor a little bit, and also your conversions and some of your starches and flavors. It can affect all that a little bit, especially the flavor. But getting a kernel, you got that hard shell on the kernel, and it'll keep it fresh, just like it's in a little Tupperware. It seals all that, everything in real well. And yeah, right, Frank. It just gets old. So if you got by the whole kernel, that husk will help keep it fresh, like it's just in a little Tupperware. So whenever you want to use it, you just grind it, and it's just like that fresh coffee bean. It's just you can smell it. It's good. It's fresh, and it's generally got a lot. It's just better flavor and works a little better. But if you get a good fresh cracked corn, it's just the same. It's the same thing. It's just corn that's been ground to a lesser than fine consistently, like a real fine meal. But yes, cornmeal is the same. There is some cornmeal. I'm trying to think of the process that they use. What is it that they use in some of these cornmeals to? I'm trying to think of the getting old and forgetting shit. Um, Enriched. That's what the word I was looking for. You don't want to use like an enriched cornmeal. You just want regular cornmeal. So if you get a regular cornmeal and like it or like an enriched, you don't want that to get the enriched, and that could be just you know I think they put iron in it and stuff like that. So, and that's something you definitely want to keep out of the meal. I think it's enriched with iron. Let's see, enriched refined grains. Let's see what they. Yeah, they just add vitamins and minerals, and I'm pretty sure iron is one of them that we really don't want. But and it just doesn't. The flavors that they add to that does not really add to it. So you don't want anything enriched. But yeah, that's basically if you take a corn kernel and you put it in your meal and you ground it cracked. Um, Crack, basically the size of the crack, if you want to use a good cracked corn, you want to get about 6 to 8 pieces per kernel. So about, the size of it's, small, about like that. You can look at a kernel and basically, sixth it out or eighth it. And that's about the size of the crack that you want. If it's easier to clear that way, and you get at the starch once you gelatinize it and everything, you get pretty much all the starches out of there once it soaks up that hot water and gelatinizes. You're going to get all of it out of there. You might get a little bit higher gravity and higher conversion if it's ground real fine, but is it worth all that trouble dealing with all the milkiness and sediments and all that? That's the debate's gone on forever and ever. But a ground meal, it's basically just grinding up a cornmeal into a grinder, a mill, the grain mill, and the size of the grind. But yeah, cornmeal, you can make your own actually. You get your own little grain mill and get you some corn, yellow dent number 2, and make you some really good cornmeal and some of the best cornbread you'll ever make from it, you know. And if you get some of that like hickory white, it makes really good cornmeal and cornbread. Cool. Yeah, I'd say, it should be fine. I mean, it works. It's just like coffee. You buy it ground up, you dump it, you drink it. It's good. It gets the job done. But to take it to the next level, getting that finely ground stuff, and I think corn is kind of the same way, especially a good quality heirloom corn. Pearl milling, I have to remember that. I used to use cornmeal all the time, man. Cornmeal and a little bit of sugar and a little bit of water, pound, gallon. Pound of cornmeal, pound of sugar, and a gallon of water. I did that for a long time. Yep. All right. I'm glad you called shots. I was getting thirsty. How much do you depend on temperature and hydrometer readings compared to taste, smell? Actually, when I did it for so many years without any of that equipment, I got pretty used to, just my taste. And once you develop a good recipe and get consistency, you don't need, especially a thermometer, you don't need it. I mean, once you get your recipe down pat, it's just replicating it. Just doing the same thing, replicating it. Really, when I use a hydrometer, is when I'm doing wines, when I'm dealing with a lot of fruits, and I'm depending just on the sugars from the fruit, and I'm not sure how sweet the fruit is, because it can say, use four, well, let's just say use 6 pounds of apples, and it's like, okay, so you 6 pounds of apples, and it's like, damn, this gravity is terrible. I could, and it's just, well, they weren't that sweet, or something, or pears, or, there's lots of fruits and even peaches and stuff. So, just because it says X amount of pounds, it's still tough to follow that recipe and depend on it. So I really like using my hydrometer for that. And I like testing myself too. And I think everybody should make a habit of doing that. Before you ever drop that hydrometer in there, drop your finger in there or a little shot glass or a little teaspoon or spoon or whatever, and get you a little bit and taste it, and see what it tastes like. It's not going to kill you. It's just mash. It's just a beer, or it's just a wine. It's just premature. So taste it and see how sweet it tastes to you. And at the end, do the same. Sweet, taste how sweet it is. Get it on your fingers, let it dry, rub it around, and see how sticky it is. See if it's still got some stickiness to it and a little sweetness in the flavor. So always test yourself, and then use your hydrometer to see how good of a guess you made. Yeah, I'd say they do. I've never tried heirloom corns like that, um, but I'd say they certainly do. But yeah, just test yourself and see. Temperature wise, you don't want to have it. Temperature is important when you're adding malts or enzymes, because you don't want to denature them, so you don't want to put them in at a high temperature. So when you're doing a mash, a grain mash, also when you gelatinize your corn, you want it at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time, or I should say, the higher the temperature, the less time is required to gelatinize it. So, and then when you add your malted grains in, you want to add those in at specific temperatures. Let's see. Let me give you a chart here. So here, this chart will tell you basically, this is centigrade up here, so this is Fahrenheit down here at the bottom. So when specifically, so let's just do some corn. So when you cook your corn and gelatinize it, I'm up here. I'm in the gray. I don't care about all this. When I want to gelatinize corn, I'm pouring in 100 to 200, 195 to 200 plus, basically boiling water. I'm dumping in boiling water on my corn, unless it's malted corn, and then that's a whole new dilemma. We'll not get that deep, but just for like regular corn to gelatinize it, the higher the temperature, the less time is required to um, the less time is required to gelatinize it. So you can gelatinize it at 170, but it's going to take many, many hours. Whereas at 190 to 205, hour and a half, and you should be pretty good to go. The higher the temperature, the less time it's going to take to gelatinize. So once that's gelatinized, after an hour and a half, you let it cool, let it cool, let it cool. So um, this range here, but you see the bars, that's the range that will tell you when you become what temperature your enzymes will live at. So, for example, corn maize. Um, Now, this is talking about alpha. Your alpha will live in there perfectly fine from 145 up to about 175 ish, and that's your alpha amylase. Anything above that, like if you had a malted corn, it would denature it. But with the high temperature alpha, you can add it in, at 180, 85 degrees, and it's perfectly fine. That's why we like using that high temperature alpha amylase. You don't have to wait. And just when you get gelatinized at 190 plus, you can throw that high temp on it, and it will thin it out really quickly, make it a lot more manageable, and you can stir it, and it cools off quicker when it becomes more of a liquid. It can cool off. Now, once you get cool, and you start wanting to add like a barley malt, right here's your temperature range for barley malt. Pretty small range, right? So, this is the temperature that you want to add for the barley malt. So this is like 145 to 155. That's the temperatures that you want to add your barley malt. You want to try to catch it the upper end. It activates a little quicker. What's going on, Billy Reed? Activates a little quicker for you and won't denature. But that's the range that you want to do it. And you want to do a little rest there. You want to do a rest. So you want to hold that temperature for a little while. So the beta amylase inside your malt, and you got some alpha in there as well, that's going to help you debranch some of your larger um, carbs. But you're going to get a lot of beta amylase in there with it. And that beta is what helps take those chopped up, debranched, long chain carbs and break them down into more fermentable sugars. So this is the range that you would use that. Here, let's see, wheat, is 150 all the way down to, 125. So, generally I throw my wheat and barley in at about the same time at about 150, you know, and those both work. It's the upper end for your wheat, and it's right in the mid range for your barley. So that works really well. And your rye is on down here, so you can let it cool. Your oats is here. So what you could do, what's step called stepping? You first do your corn, and then you use your barley malt, and then you'll throw in some wheat, and then, if you're using some oats, you'll throw in some oats, because as the temperature drops, and as the temperature drops, you can add some rye at this temperature. So these upper ends here is the upper level to where you won't denature the enzymes that are in these grains, right? So this is a really, really good, chart to have on your phone or next to you when you're doing this, because it's hard for me to remember all these, especially when you start experimenting with a lot of different things. But this barley is usually the number one. That's 145 to 55. Wheat 150. You know, and those are the most important too. Oats, 145 is not gonna hurt anything. Rye 140, ish. So, but this chart will help you. I've got this chart. It's in the file section in the Moonshine Militia. It's also on Distilling 101 page and in DIY Shine and Stuff page. So if you want it, send me a message. I'll shoot it to you. It's a great chart to have. It's a must. So I hope that answers your question, brother. But yeah, that's when temperatures really come into the most important play is when you're dealing with your malts, so you don't denature anything. And also, um, the malts do have the beta amylase, but I also use what it's called. It's a liquid glucoamylase, and I can add that right when I'm adding my yeast or at a yeast pitching temp. So about 95 degrees, you can add that glucose. And what that liquid glucose does is if there's any long chains that the betas didn't get to, or you got some trisaccharides or oligosaccharides in there, you can further break those up into that glucose just chops everything up. It makes almost everything in there fermentable sugars. Whatever the beta misses, it will go ahead and get, which is another good reason to use both the alpha, liquid high temp alpha, and the liquid glucose. That way you depend less on the enzymes, the alpha and beta enzymes. Beta is more of a natural enzyme. It's an endogenous enzyme that's in the barley malts and wheat malts. Wheat malts have a lot of too. Um, so those are considered called an endogenous enzymes, and those are great, but a lot of the 6 rows don't really carry the flavor that a lot of your 2 rows barleys do, especially some of these specialty barleys 2 rows that they've come up with for beer making, which I think and most people think have better flavor than just your standard 6 row. But with a lot of your chocolate malts and some of your honey malts and some of these other malts, sometimes the process that they use to make them, like the chocolate malt, they heat them up. So that denatures a lot of the enzymes. So when you use these exogenous enzymes, you don't really depend on those malt enzymes as much, and you can pretty much choose whatever malt you want and not have to worry about the enzymes that are in that to be your diastatic to break everything down. Um, and you don't have to have pH. All that you don't have to have. You can, but it's good to have. I'm not, it's not a must have, but if you know how to use it, as cheap as they are, it's nice to have. I just use paper. I used to use the little pens and stuff, and those things 10, 15, $20. Yeah, they might last you a year and then they tear up. You just get tired of buying that shit. So I've started buying these little kombucha strips, and they're real accurate, and it's easy to tell what color they are. Whereas the other ones are a lot of times they're hard. It's like has a larger range, and it's hard to tell if is this 5 or 6.5. It looks I can't tell with the color. With these kombucha strips, they're designed to go from 0 to 7. So they don't even deal with basic pH. It's just neutral to acidic, and that's what we deal with in fermentation. So those are real good. You get a strip of them for $10. I think they say you get 180 uses. I guess it's 180 inches, and you get 180 uses. I cut mine in half. I use about a half inch because in tweezers I dip it down in there, and a half inch I can see the color of it just as well as I can an inch, and I get twice as many. And I'm still on my first roll, and I've used them for a year. So it's real cheap, and it's good to know your pH, especially starting. A lot of people don't realize it, but you want a 5.3 when you're actually doing conversions. A lower pH will help you with your conversions as well as your fermentation. So if you can get it to 5.3, like the water that you're adding to the corn and stuff from the get-go, if you can throw a little citric acid in there and bring it down to 5.3, throw it in there, do all your conversions, and then let it sit, let it cool. And when you're about ready to pitch your yeast, you can go back in there again, check your pH. If it's gone down some, you can adjust it up with anything that you want to. This is the time you can use baking soda. It doesn't hurt a thing because there's no yeast in there yet. So it's not going to hurt them. So you can use anything you want at this point to raise and lower your pH without any effect on your yeast because there's none in there yet. So you can raise your yeast back, raise your pH back up to 5.3 if it drops, during the conversion process or whatever. But doing it at 5.3 for some reason tends to help. Um, so it's good to have it kind of low like that, slightly acidic. So use it that way, and I like getting it scientific. I've had some chemistry. I've had college chemistry and biology and stuff, so I enjoy getting into the scientific side of it. But it's 100% not necessary. It's just how into it you want to get. Now, I will say, um, there's two ways to get consistent, and that is through repetition and doing it the same thing the same way, which a lot of old shiners like me, I did the same thing the same way for many, many years and developed a pretty good consistency on my thin mash, cornmeal, sugar, water mash. I got consistent. I could get consistent results, and I could expect it to taste pretty much the same every time I did it. And that's developing a consistency. Also using the scientific method and learning temperatures and measurements, exacting measurements, keep a chart of everything that you do. You can get consistency that way also without having to get so many years of experience. So, you can use that to help develop some consistency as well. So chart everything that you do and replicate that, and you can get consistent. And that's really one of the what's going on, Steve? That's one of the best ways. When you get commercial, talk to any commercial distillery, and what's one thing that they strive for is consistency. Damn fruit flies, man! You start fermenting shit, and you never know, you start getting fruit flies everywhere. But getting consistency is one thing that commercial distillers really strive for, because when people buy that jar or that bottle and they open it up, they want it to taste just like that last bottle did, the one before that. So um, once you get to that level, then yeah, science really comes into play to develop consistency. And I mean, these guys, they measure the moisture content of the corn. They they get considerably more into it than what we do, even on a science level. But it's also enjoyable, and if that floats your boat, man, you can get into it. If not, you can follow a recipe and come up with excellent results without ever breaking out a hydrometer, a thermometer, a pH meter, or anything like that. You can still make a good drink. Good stuff right there. That is for my buddy. I'm not sure what the W stands for. It's Buddy Butcher Sour Mash. Jeff, you'll have to tell me what the W stands for. But it's Buddy Butcher Sour Mash Select. Very good stuff. Buddy Jeff makes good corn liquor. I haven't made any in a while, so I don't have any in there jarred up. I got mostly brandy in there right now. No, I've never made pumpkin alcohol, but you can. I mean, there's plenty of starches in a pumpkin. I think it would turn out very slimy, but if you can get it cleared out good, I'd say it probably tastes pretty damn good, to be honest. But you again, with your starches, um, damn, I hate these fruit flies. Oh my God, I'm starting already, man. I hadn't missed them all winter. Now they're back. Um, and they always come around this damn monitor. It's so bright and white, and they all flock to it, especially when I open up a jar and turn on my monitor. Um, but yeah, they're as long as you use the amylase, just the same. You got to use your alpha and your glucose, unless you want to make some pumpkin and mix it with a little malt and bring in your diastatics from your malts. Yeah, you can. And that's another reason why I like having the high temp alpha and that liquid glucose. You can use any kind of starch. It's great for potatoes, any kind of starchy vegetable or anything. You can convert. But yeah, there's plenty of starches and sweetness in pumpkin. I'd say I'd say it'd be kind of slimy. It'd be a mess. I don't know. I imagine it might make a pretty good cap. I think I've heard people doing it. I can't remember what their results were though. I think Phil Billy probably has done it a time or two. He's tried about everything, man. That'd be a good question to ask old Phil Billy. Jump in there in the militia and ask around. I'm sure there's some of those boys that's done some pumpkins. Because you can get them cheap as fuck, after Halloween. I mean, you can pretty much walk up and down the street and get all, but I guess most of those have been scraped out and sitting out for a while. But hell, that's probably started the fermentation process already. Strawberry first few. I'm waiting for watermelons to go on sale. They were $6 each, here, 6.47 or some shit, and there weren't even big ones. So I got to get some watermelons for the brandy contest, but I haven't found them cheap enough yet. May have to make a little trip somewhere where they're real cheap. Well, it's getting about that time. It's almost 11. I try to keep it down to 3 hours unless somebody's got a question. If there's still some questions out there, or if I missed your questions. If I missed your questions, be sure to ask me, and we'll repeat it. Don't I won't get mad at you, I promise. I don't get mad. It takes a lot to get old Santa mad. But when I do, I explode. But it takes a lot. It really does. So if you say, God damn it, I asked you 5 minutes ago, when the fuck you gonna answer me? I won't get mad at you. But I'll look back. If I miss your questions, let me know, and I'll try to get them. I think I've missed a question or two before. I've looked back after it was all done. I scrolled back and looked. I'm like, holy shit, I forgot to answer that question. Or like the Nike or Adidas guy from last week. I I get a little bit behind a lot of times because, believe it or not, I get a little long-winded in my answers. But I just try to explain things so it's understandable, and try not to get too scientific or too simple, so you kind of understand what and why and how. And I try to answer a lot of those questions when I answer the questions. That way, it's understandable to everybody because I know a lot of the reasons a lot of people don't like the scientific stuff is because a lot of these scientific assholes try to use a lot of big words that impress everybody with their big scientific words. But it's like, you know, you read it, it's like, what the fuck did I just read? It's hard. They don't explain it on a layman term. And I think half the time, more than half the time they do that, is because they're trying to impress people with their knowledge and not really educate. And I've had that also when I was in school. I've had a lot of people that were a lot of instructors that were more intent on impressing than educating, and that becomes a big problem. But so if I don't get to your questions, repeat them or let me know that you've asked them, and I'll try to get to them. All right, brother, get your donkeys in line. We're gonna be out of here anyway, Kimbo. It's 11. I'm at my 3 hour. I try to do 3 hours, but I'll go over if there's somebody wanting to just talk about something, man. I've been known to go on and on till the next morning, man. I've done podcasts till 10 a.m. I'll sit here and drink and ramble on as long as you want to listen to me. But we'll be back Saturday at 8 Eastern. So if you got any questions, I enjoy having y'all here as well, Jeff. I do, and I enjoy questions, and I enjoy learning things from people here and questions that they ask. Sometimes, believe it or not, don't don't believe what they tell you. I can't answer everything, so sometimes the ones that I can't, um, I will look it up, and if I can find a reliable source, like on the Anonymous that we were talking about earlier, I'll let you know. But if it's something not real reliable, I'll look on the NIH side. I really like using scientific and stuff like that, especially when I'm looking up toxins and something that's going to affect your health, and especially a neurotoxin like this adenosine. So I'm definitely going to follow up on that and research that a little bit, and hopefully I can remember to bring it up Saturday. If not, somebody remind me, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I'm thinking that hopefully the temperature will denature that toxin and make it less effective. But I did read something from somewhere that said it wouldn't. But then again, that was Reddit, so I don't take anything from Reddit at all. I just no, I don't do Reddit. But I did see a question there. What am I working on brewing right now? I've still got the blackberry brandy I've got to run. It's been in there for a few months. And I'm getting ready to start doing some experiments with some yellow label angel yeast. It's a yeast that requires no enzymes, no gelatinization. Crazy, huh? So I'm going to do some rice with it, which is what it's intended for. And I'm also going to do some just corn, just regular old cracked corn, and see how it works with that. And hopefully I can do that. Well, I still got a pretty busy week. My basement flooded a couple of weeks ago, and we're still working on that. And I've got some flooring. I got to put in tile down here, but I've got to get something in my barrels, man. But it's still just getting a little bit too cold at night. Like we were looking earlier, I've got some nights that are low 48, high 50 something, 53. So it's like fuck, that's just I can't do it outside. I don't use any of those, fish tank heaters and all that outside. Inside, I can use some, yeah, I can use some oil heaters, those little oil radiator heaters. I like using those inside around some of my smaller fermenters. But I'm really looking forward to, nighttime temps in the 60s, daytime in the 80s, so I can, at least average 70 and expect some decent results. It's better if it gets warmer. I'd rather 70 at night, 85 during the day. That's perfect. And do it in the shade, because you don't want the direct sunlight on your barrels, especially if they're black barrels, because those suckers can get hot as fuck, man, and it can ruin a fermentation and kill your yeast in a heartbeat because they get hot. So I like to ferment in the shade outside. So that's another little tip. I think somebody said shots. Thank you, Frank. Good stuff. All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in, and hopefully we all learned something. I did tonight. Hopefully we can all take something away from all these little sessions, and invite your friends. Hit the like button if you're on Facebook. Thumbs up. Subscribe. Join the Moonshine Militia. Come join our group. I also have DIY shining stuff that I have on Facebook as well. So join those groups and come in there and ask you questions there. We got a lot of knowledgeable people in there that can help you. I'll jump in there. A lot of times I'll watch the answers, and if somebody's giving some bad answers, I'll jump in there and answer something every once in a while. But most of the guys in there are pretty knowledgeable. Liquid smoke. Now who brought that up? I totally fucking missed that, Chickster. I didn't see that. Did somebody? Liquid smoke. I like it. I've never tried it, but I mean, I like it on a lot of my foods and stuff. So, and I put some in my little barbecue and sauce. So that sounds good. That's something interesting. Yeah, rub it in, Frank. How you got outside and what's your nighttime and daytime temps there, brother? You're close to the coast though. You probably averaging 70 or 80 over there by now. All right, Michael. Got a question. Got a Weber 13.2. Awesome. I haven't done a vinegar run, but is it necessary to do a sacrificial run? Okay. Awesome question. Vinegar runs are generally used to help clean your copper. So this acid in there will help break up any green oxidization, copper oxides that are built up on the copper, and it'll help clean that up. So basically, on your Vever, is this a football steel or is it one of the little 2 pot, 3 pots? Wow, Rick, I hate that for you, brother. You got heaters. That's cool. Michael, is this one of the football 3 pot? Okay. With your 3 pots, if you want to, you can just take like a cork and put in one end of the copper and just pour vinegar in the top and let it sit for a while and just rinse it through. You don't really have to boil it and steam it through. You're just basically wanting to remove the copper oxides, the green filigree or whatever you want to call it, that build up on your copper, verdigris or whatever, verdigris, yeah, that build up on your copper. It's just oxidation. So that acid helps eat that off. Um, so that it's good for that. As far as a sacrificial run, um, on your Vevers, since if you have some heads or some alcohol, if you want to just use some pure grain or something like that, um, you can take a white rag and just really rub the inside. Of course, you want to do them with like Dawn dishwashing to get any oils off. But after you use the Dawn, if you want to take some heads, if you got some heads or some shine or some pure grain, really concentrated, higher proof, better, put it on a rag and just yeah, yeah, yeah. Did you? Yeah, on your worms. Yeah, you can cork one end and just pour your vinegar in the other and let it sit and let it come through and save it. Put it in a jar. Just put still cleaner on your vinegar jar. That way you don't try to use it in foods, and you can reuse it. Just keep it sealed and keep your lid on it. And you can keep reusing it. And then just run some water. Basically, just rinse it out with water, and you'll be good to go. But for a first time use, I would recommend going ahead and running some hot water through it. That hot water is going to get anything that's water soluble. The vinegar is going to get anything that is acid soluble. And like I was talking about with the alcohol, if you want to do sacrificial, that'll get anything that alcohol soluble. So you cover all your bases there. But with a Vever, they're generally pretty clean. Just wash it with a Dawn, and then, like I say, take some heads or some pure grain or some high proof shine, put it on a white cloth, and just rub the shit out of it. That will clean a lot of your buffing. They put some buffing compounds on these pots that will be hard to clean off, and they use it for polishing compounds, buffing compound. Um, Clean those up with some heads, and it'll, they will build up, and it'll get all that polishing and buffing compounds off of it. You'll see that rag; it'll turn gray as fuck, man, and it's like, wow, I had no idea after I cleaned it, I'm still getting this off there. So you could actually use rubbing alcohol. I mean, just clean it afterwards, rinse it with water, and it's not going to be a high enough concentrate to hurt you. It's going to evaporate, right? So, and you pour it on the cuts, so it's not like it's going to kill you. You're not drinking it. But yeah, just rubbing alcohol, anything like that works, and just clean it. I mean, you have to put a lot of elbow grease in it, but it'll clean up a lot of that inside. I don't worry about the outside, but the inside, you'll see that gray shit coming off, man. And so get all that you can off. It's a buffing compound, rubbing compound, whatever, polishing compound. A lot of it too, if you see how they're made, it's a big hydraulic press, comes down and it stamps a big square piece of or a round blank into a pot, and it's like then they trim the edge and make a pot out of it. And if you look at the grease on that head coming down, man, with that friction and that pressure and the temperature that it goes through, just suddenly it gets hot. And when it goes through that press, it puts a lot of that grease into that metal pour, So using alcohol like that, rubbing it out, you'll be surprised, especially on some of that Chinese shit. But they make good pots. But I always recommend somebody run some, vinegar water or just water through it, A, to get familiar with your steel, but B, to look for any leaks, because you don't want to have a good run going with a good mash, and all of a sudden you have to stop in the middle to deal with leaks and shit. So it's always good to get familiar with your steel, get familiar with boiling and having the steam. You don't need a condenser water, in your condenser or anything. But if it's the 3-pot bever, it's your thumper is basically a slobber box unless you use the little downcomer in it, and it's really tough to use. And the condensers on them are way undersized. So you really have to keep that condenser temperature water that's going in there really cool. And a lot of times it's good to keep take these water bottles and open them up, pour a little bit of water out of them, and then seal them and put them in your freezer, because they'll swell up on you if you don't pour a little water out. They might bust. But that right there will fit right in that little coil, and if it's frozen, it'll help keep it cool on your little bever condensers. But it's best to, if you can, upgrade that, um, and it'll help you. You won't have to circulate so much cold water in it, because they're really undersized. So that would be your first upgrade. We'll work on that condenser and get you a little bit longer of a copper worm, and that way you don't have to really have a cold water going through there, because the little inlets that are on that pot at the bottom and top, I mean, they got a valve on the top and bottom. I can understand why they have a valve on the bottom. That way you can regulate how much water goes in. So yeah, you want your water to go in through the bottom of the pot, right? And out through the top, right? Always on shotgun condensers, Libby condensers, and in your flakes and regular worm type condensers as well. You want the cold water coming in at the bottom, so there's a valve at the bottom of your little pot, and that's where your cold water will come in. And there's a valve there that will allow you to regulate the amount of flow coming in. Why in the fuck they put a valve on the outflow at the top, I'll never understand, because what does that fucking do? Nothing. It regulates how much is going to drain out. I mean, you just leave it wide open and adjust how much water is coming in with the bottom valve, right? So that's some Chinese engineering out there. They don't know what the fuck they're doing, but it's generally better to have a larger um, exhaust or exit pipe than your entrance. That way you can, pretty much open it wide open, and hopefully it'll all drain out. If not, you'll have to adjust your flow. But those condensers will be the first thing that you want to upgrade on that bever. But as far as cleaning it, yeah, you just want to run, at least boil some water and steam it, run it through, and get familiar with it. Make sure you don't have any leaks, and make sure everything's on there tight. Also, don't tighten up all your fittings on there too tight, because those gaskets, they'll split in a heartbeat, and you don't want to over tighten them, or they'll break on you every time. And generally, those are a lot of things that a lot of people will replace first. It'll be your gaskets and your condenser. So, oh, you did great. Yeah, yeah, actually, absolutely, brother. We'll work with it, and um, yeah, you can have your pipe coming up from your bever, and basically on your lid it's just a hole, right? So we can take out loose the pipe and get rid of all that shit, and you've basically got a pot with a hole in the lid. Okay, you can increase the size of the hole in your lid. You can go to a half inch or 5/8 or whatever you want to go to, and you can go from there up to an elbow and over to a jar rig, and a bypass jar rig. You got to make sure you got my bypass on there, but a bypass jar rig, and then into your condenser from there, man. And that's awesome. Yeah, it makes an awesome setup. And Philby can definitely hook you up with a bypass jar rig for sure. Yep, that's definitely what you want to do, brother. Absolutely. Get about 10, 15 feet of coiled copper. Don't go out and buy a stick of fucking copper and come home and try to coil it. That's hard as fuck. You can buy it boxed and coiled, It's cheap. It's a softer copper, so it's easy to work with. It's not too soft, and so it's already coiled for you. You can actually tighten your coil up. Just be careful doing that so you don't kink it. But it's definitely best to get the coiled in the box. I think they use it for refrigeration and stuff. And that 5/8 uh, coiled make a good worm, and 15 feet in a 5-gallon bucket. And unless you go to above like a 40-gallon still, you'll be able to condense anything that you throw at it with that same worm and flake or bucket, whatever. So yeah, that just build an oversized worm for what you got now, and that way you can grow into it, and you'll never have to worry about that again unless you get a real big. 20 feet's perfect, bro. That's awesome. You won't ever have to worry about it, man. You could put a 50-gallon steel on that sub bitch, man. If it's 5/8, hell yeah, man. You could, or even half, you know. Yeah, Frank's telling everybody, all right, this is now we're all measuring our worms. I got a bigger worm. I got the biggest worm. Oh, you guys funny as fuck. Uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you get like the football, favorite football, got that fucking fruit fly. So if you get like the favorite football steel, you'll have a 2 or a 2.5 ferrule on the top, and then you can just use spools and elbows with tri clamps and gaskets, and that's beautiful, man. Once you do that, that's definitely the way you all want to go. But I hope I answered your question. And Michael, I hope you get her lined up. But go ahead and run you some boiling water through there. Boil some water through it. Run it through your setup. Make sure you don't have any leaks and everything. Make sure everything's up and up. And let us know how it turns out, man. All right. Not being a smartass, haven't seen what kind of acid it does create, but it would. But would hydrogen peroxide and Clorox work if no? No, never mix Clorox with anything, brother. I'm glad I saw this. Never mix Clorox with anything. Never use Clorox in any of your distilling equipment ever. Clorox is hard to clean off, man. It leaves a residue behind, and it's really tough. So never use Clorox, and don't use. A lot of people talk about using hydrogen peroxide with the citric acid, and we used to recommend that, but they found that the peroxide really, it doesn't concentrate the acid, but it makes it work really hard fast, and it actually etches the surface of the copper. So if you look at the surface of copper with a microscope, it's going to be fairly smooth with some pores. If you use hydrogen peroxide and citric acid on it and let it sit and then rinse it, when you look at it again through the microscope, it's going to look like sand. It's going to look rough like sand, and that's because it's taken some of the metal off. It's actually the acid eats away at the metal, right? So it's actually taking some of that metal off there. And what happens is when you do that, it makes a lot more surface area, and it actually increases your chances of it oxidizing and turning green and getting that verdigris or whatever they call that greening. I mean, it's beautiful looking if it's like on a lamp outside, and they spray it with acid to make it have that color. But you definitely don't want that color, on your worm, and that's why I don't really recommend using a lot of vinegar and stuff. Vinegar's fine, citric acid's fine, but definitely don't want to use hydrogen peroxide. But don't use Clorox. Get you some of that Star San if you really want to sterilize things. That Star San rinse is really clean, and it doesn't have a residue and a bad aftertaste. It's definitely the way to go. I started out using Clorox years ago too for the same purpose, and I did get an aftertaste. And it's, yeah, use Star San. It's a big jug's expensive, but it's super concentrated. I mean, you're using like fucking a teaspoon in a fucking gallon. So I mean, it's super concentrated shit. So it lasts forever. It'll expire before you get done with that gallon if you buy a gallon. Let's just say that. So don't worry about the gauge thickness. Making a steel. I thought you were talking about for your condenser. Um, a 16 ounce or 18 ounce is fine for like a 20 or less. Anything bigger than a 20, you definitely want to go with a 20-ounce copper. And as far as gauge, I don't know what that equates to. I'm sure you can Google it. A 20 ounces, basically, they go by ounces, and that's how many ounces it weighs in a certain size. I think it's a square foot weighs so much, So, or maybe I don't know, square inch, oh, a square foot. So it's a specific size. They weigh it, and that's the thickness makes an ounce, and that's how a lot of the sheet I buy from like roofing places, they do it in ounces. I think there's 16 and 20 that you can get. 16 is fine for like your jar rigs and stuff. If you want to make a copper jar rig instead of doing like it with an infusion port and drain, instead of doing jars that we don't have to worry about breaking and things like that, or make a little thumper or a little gin basket, little crafts or small steels. But yeah, anything bigger than like a 15 to 20, I definitely would recommend. Even then, I'd recommend going with a 20. It's just more durable. It's not going to ding up and bend up on you as easily. But 20 ounce, and I can look real quick, see how many that equates to. 20-ounce copper. $20 is 22 gauge. 20-ounce copper corresponds to 22 gauge. And 18 is 18. 18 ounces, 18 gauge. Well, there's a good standard to go by. 18 ounce, 18 gauge. That's good to know. So 20 ounce is like 22 gauge. But that's what you want if you're gonna do anything of a good size. Yeah, you definitely go for 20. 3/8, half. 3/8 is fine, and unless you're going with a big steel, your 3/8 will be fine, brother. Especially that long. Yeah, yeah, it's an oxidizer. It's catalyst. It's oxidizer catalyst. Yeah, it just makes it work super fast. And that with that citric acid, they're finding, man, it literally etches it. I mean, if you're wanting to etch stuff, or make that verdigris or something, mix your acid, a little citric acid and some peroxide, and you'll get that greening. Like, if you got some copper planters or, coach lights that are in your house, do you want to make them look all antique and shit? Yeah, spray some of that shit on there, man, and it'll green it, and then rinse it with water real quick so that it'll dissolve it. But yeah, it'll make it nice and green for you. That way it'll look nice and old. Yeah, I'm agreeing with Frank. We found out now that basically the reason a lot of old moonshiners used copper was because oil drums made shitty liquor and it made dangerous liquor, and it put lots of rust and metal oxides and metal ions in the water that were bad for you and could fuck you up, and had oil residues. And there was a lot of moonshine stills made with fucking oil drums back in the day. Trust me, backwoods shine was something you really didn't want to fool with unless it was done by somebody good. A lot of times it was oil drums. They had fucking car radiators for condensers. Anything they could find, they would. Stainless steel pots were few and far between. And so copper is pretty malleable. They could hammer one out. They could use it in a submarine pot pretty easily. It wasn't as expensive, as it is today, but it was something that they could solder, and they didn't have, most hillbillies didn't have welders and all this to work with, but they could solder, and So they, copper became pretty popular metal to use if you wanted to make a good product. Um, Subsequently, in the alcohol industry, they found a long time ago that copper, because of its malleability, and they made beautiful alembic steels out of it. But they also found that copper helps remove a lot of your sulfides because that sulfide will bond to copper. And so a lot of these sulfides from your distillate, when you're cooking it off, bonds to the copper in your cap, mostly in your cap. So when you're looking at a steel, you won't see a whole lot in the liquid mash part, but you'll see a lot in your cap and in your piping. And they found out these days they make copper mesh, and it's just basically, used for cleaning, and they use it in woodworking. It's used in a lot of different things, but they make a copper mesh. Now you want to make sure that you get a pure copper mesh and not something that's copper plated steel, like an SOS pad that's been copper plated. They're out there too, so check it with a magnet, make sure what you got. But yeah, a copper mesh will do just as much or more because of the surface area. So you get that copper mesh, it's like a screen, and you roll it up and you put it in your column, or in your in your tube, up tube. Not, if you got like a small half inch, don't stuff copper mesh into your half inch pipe. Okay, don't do that. You're just going to cause a lot of back pressure in your steel. You don't want that. But in once we start dealing with larger steels, and when you're using 1.5 inch or 2 inch tubing and spools, then you got plenty of vapor path for you to put a like in your football steels too. Like, that's why I recommend those Vever football steels. Everybody, you can put that copper mesh, you can ball it up, roll it up, put it in that football, and all that vapor goes through that copper mesh, and all those sulfides will bond to it, okay, and remove it. And it's just the same as if you had copper all over the fucking place, okay. And it's a lot easier to take care of a stainless boiler than it is a copper boiler. So a lot of people are switching over to even large distilleries that are going for efficiency and cost. You know, they'll put that fancy old, what do they call it? Velvelux or something like that. Really old, high-end copper, beautiful workmanship, thick copper. Very, very nice, but very, very expensive. And really, it's the lipstick. It's just real pretty. But that copper mesh and having copper plumbing will, it'll help. It'll help. Yeah, you can use the mesh in your thumper for sure. Yeah, because your copper, it's passing through that. Anytime you can get that copper in contact with the vapor, it's going to hit that, and it's going to attract that sulfides like a little magnet. It just sticks to that copper. It wants to bond to it. So it's just the valence of electrons on the outside of the molecules they want to bond. So they tend to bond, and that sulfide really likes that copper to bond to. And you use that mesh, and you just rinse it off after each use. You can get 4 or 5, 6 uses out of it. Clean it, keep cleaning it, clean it. Eventually, you just pitch it and use, roll you up another roll. It's not real expensive, and it's copper. If you want to melt it and recycle it, you can, but it really doesn't weigh a lot. But it does have a good surface area, for you to pull out the sulfides. So definitely. Yeah, those submarine steels there's something else. The best thing about a submarine steel, other than its size, is the way the liquids roll in it. The way it's shaped, it tends to boil, and the liquids roll up and along the sides and turn over, and it rolls, like in a circular path inside of it. So if a lot of these old shiners, they get a little bit of grain in there, and they'd stir it and stir it and stir it, and then once you get it rolling, it doesn't scorch as easily, and then they throw the top on there, and once it got rolling, and they wouldn't have to worry about it. But that's, if I'm going to do distilling on the grain, I'm going to have a jacketed steel, or be using a bull bag or something. I'm still not going to do that. But I've got some ideas about thumpers too to increase some circulation and flow. And who knows, maybe one day I'll patent that like I should have my bypass. Yeah, yeah, it's good, brother. Yeah, just get you if you want to do 20. I mean, 20 ounce isn't that much more expensive than the 18 per sheet. And if you want something that's going to last you a long time, absolutely, man. Yeah, you can put your mesh in there. Actually, with when you got an inch and a half or a 2 inch column, like come on the football column on the football steels, um, then yeah, you can pack the column. You can put it inside the sight glass and watch it work. Actually, helps create some reflux. If you want to put it in the column, same in the football head, it creates a little more reflux, so you get a little higher proof. But it'll definitely pull a lot of that off there. Absolutely. Yeah, anything that you can add. If they don't think that it works, tell them to look up Rashig, Raschig, Rashig. All right, let me check my spelling on that. I'm drunk. Yeah, that's right. Raschigring. Now, a lot of times the Rashig rings were made of ceramic, but you can also make Rashig rings with copper and copper fittings and just small circular pieces of copper. So read up on Rashig rings, Raschig, Rashig, and read up on those and what they do. But that's what Frank's talking about here is using like regular copper fittings, just like regular pieces of copper. Just, take your tubing, cut it into little 1/2 inch pieces, and those little rings inside there called Rashig rings, you can put them in your vapor path, you can put them in your thumper, you can put them in the bottom of your boiler, and it'll help prevent scorching like marbles. Yeah, sure can, brother. Yeah, they do. They come out dirty, and yeah, it's going to pull the sulfides out of the solution. But if you can put them in, in the vapor path, it does as good. Like in the football or the football steel, you can pack that full of Rashid rings. It works well anywhere. And if you have it like a screen in your column, you can pack your column full of Rashid rings. And it also doesn't shut down your vapor flow. That's the beauty of it. You still have a good vapor velocity, which you want to have. But yeah. Yeah, you can have cool air. You could put a fan on it. You could like an old time steel with like a big cap. You've heard old moonshiners talk about, you know, having higher proof liquor when they run on a rainy day. That's because the cap and the cape are getting all that cold rain on it, and it caused a lot of reflux, man. And it caused the run to take twice as damn long, but it put out a lot higher proof too. And it's because they didn't realize it, but that cold water was causing a lot of reflux, and it boosted their proof and made that hot liquor. But yeah, you can use a fan on your column or on your cap, and it does that, but not quite like a deflegmator, you know. Yeah, I got to go too, brother. Glad y'all tuned in, and be sure to hit the like button. Tell your friends. Join us again Saturdays at 8, Wednesdays at 8 Eastern, and bring a buddy. Share your hobby with some friends, and I guess we'll see you guys Saturday night, guys and gals. See y'all Saturday night. Shine on. Have a good week. We'll see you this weekend.